Chapter 670. Whinnying Dragon King. No, Ao Guang, the Dragon King of the East Sea, was hiding amidst the watery mist, with a few old dragons, Lord Xiansheng, Catfish Flood Dragon, and a group of mountain spirits and water demons from Myriad Immortals' planet, watching the battle on a distant cape with a frown on his face. The dark shell 8-direction immovable formation had been broken into pieces by Ming Li, and a few flying ships were forcibly pulled out from the green turtle shell. The soldiers on the ships were knocked unconscious by Ming Li's Sanskrit chanting, which sounded like a loud bell. The flying boats slowly floated in the air, drifting along with the wind. Monk Ming Li laughed strangely as he swung his wooden fish and wooden fish hammer with all his might to attack the formation that was barely formed by the few remaining flying ships. Loud booms reverberated in the sky, and a rain of light splattered in all directions. Auspicious lights shone in all directions. The East Sea Dragon King, who was conferred by Wu Qi, frowned. He was hesitating whether he should bring his underlings to rescue Huang Liang and the others. After all, Huang Liang and the 10,000 soldiers were deployed in East Sea County, the military force directly under Wu Qi's command. But, these Dragon Kings and Water Demons were all demon cultivators, and the Yu and Myriad Immortal Alliance were engaged in a life-and-death battle with each other. If anyone knew that there was a group of demon cultivators hiding in East Sea County, it would not be a good thing for Wu Qi. While he was hesitating, the dark armor 8-directional immovable formation that was formed by the few remaining ships was finally broken by Ming Li. After a few hours, even the wooden fish that was made of pure gold was full of dents and dents. Monk Ming Li finally broke through the formation and tore the 12 flying boats apart. The long bronze chains were broken and dragged randomly on both sides of the flying boat. They looked like the whiskers of a dead fish hanging down, giving off a lifeless feeling. Tens of thousands of soldiers and dozens of oracles were knocked unconscious by Ming Li's chanting, and the only person who was conscious on the ships now was Huang Liang, the former acting military minister of Hai Province, now the leading general of East Sea County, and also Wu Qi's messenger or adjutant. Huang Liang, a timid, lecherous, greedy, and sophisticated man, stood trembling on the prow of the flying ship with a long knife in his hand. Looking at Ming Li, who was hovering in front of him on a white cloud, he felt his lower abdomen clench in a strong urge to urinate. He clenched his legs tightly around the piece of meat between them, trying his best not to make a fool of himself on the spot. Forcing himself to calm down, Huang Liang howled in a hoarse do as he stared at Ming Li, do you general, do you general. Ming Li smiled warmly. He placed the wooden fish and the wooden fish hammer on the prow of the ship, then gently pressed his hands on Huang Liang's shoulders and said, "The Buddha is merciful. My hands have never been stained with blood, so how can it be considered as attacking you? I'm just preaching, looking for the fated ones, and helping all living beings to release their souls from purgatory. This is a good deed to accumulate great virtues." A Buddhist light that looked like a colored glaze slowly flowed down from Huang Liang's shoulders to his entire body. Ming Li smiled warmly at Huang Liang, and there was an indescribable sense of benevolence in his eyes and brows. Huang Liang's body was twitching. He felt as if he had returned to his mother's womb, feeling peaceful and carefree. He felt that this Ming Li before him was the closest person to him, and that he should obey all of Ming Li's orders. Huang Liang was so close to reciting the name of Buddha along with Ming Li, but suddenly, Wu Qi's face appeared before Huang Liang's eyes. He suddenly thought of all the cruel and merciless things that Wu Qi had done, and recalled Wu Qi's resolute and merciless methods. Huang Liang shuddered. Suddenly, the long saber in his hand thrust out like a gust of wind, aiming straight at Ming Li's lower abdomen. Seeing that Huang Liang was about to fall into his trap and become his most loyal follower, Ming Li nodded with a smile on his face. The vigilance in his heart had been reduced by 99%. Suddenly, Huang Liang launched an attack. The blade of his saber had pierced 3 centimeters deep into Ming Li's lower abdomen. Only then did Ming Li react. With a furious roar, he quickly retreated and threw a backhand punch at Huang Liang's head. The wind generated by the punch was accompanied by the roar of a heavenly dragon. Ming Li's punch was the Dragon Roar Fist, one of the 18 heavenly dragon demons subduing techniques, one of the 8 groups of heavenly dragons of the Buddhist League. When this punch was cultivated to the limit, it would have the strength of 100 dragons. The power of this divine power was definitely not weaker than the body-tempering techniques of the immortals and the various body-tempering techniques of the human race. It was a divine power of fiend refining that only those guardian arhats with wisdom, aptitude, and perseverance could cultivate. Ming Li's cultivation base was not that high, but his punch also had the strength of 3 dragons, which was enough to shatter the body of an ordinary heaven immortal. With his cultivation base, Huang Liang could at most have the strength of 1 dragon of a heavenly dragon. When he encountered Ming Li's punch, he would be smashed to pieces. But, intimidated by Wu Qi's ferocious power, Huang Liang suddenly had the thought of risking his life. The ferocious Huang Liang bared his teeth and glared at Ming Li with his scarlet eyes. He paid no attention to the punch that came smashing down on his face. Instead, he swung his saber with all his strength and continued to thrust it toward Ming Li's lower abdomen. A vast amount of purple mist kept rushing into Huang Liang's body. Huang Liang's blood was boiling, his internal organs were trembling, and his muscles and bones were filled with a ferocious heat unique to a desperate man. At that moment, Huang Liang had forgotten about life and death, about wealth and honor, about the fact that he was actually a cowardly and slippery man, about the dozens of beautiful girls he had hidden in his backyard, and about the large amount of gold, silver, and jewelry he had stored in his underground storeroom, and about the terrible scene where he might be beaten to a pulp. He just clenched his teeth and concentrated all of his spirit, energy, and spirit on the blade. All of his blood and qi were sucked out and injected into the long blade in his hand. In that instant, Huang Liang's body suddenly turned into a black hole, and all the purple mist on Panga continent rushed toward him. In the blink of an eye, at least 100 times more purple mist than Huang Liang had ever absorbed in his life had fused into his body, quickly fusing with every cell in his body. A jarring cracking sound rang out from Huang Liang's body. His cultivation base, which had stagnated for at least 10 years, soared 100 times in that instant, from the equivalent of a 35th tier heaven immortal to a 27th tier heaven immortal. In other words, Huang Liang had risen from the realm of 1 star of the first Pangu heaven to the realm of 3 stars. All of a sudden, the blade became hazy, and only a shadow could be seen, stabbing into Ming Li's lower abdomen without making a sound. The 1.5-foot-long blade sank into Ming Li's body. Pale golden blood sprayed out along the grooves in the blade, and a faint whistling sound of the wind could be heard. In just a blink of an eye, at least a dozen kilograms of blood sprayed out. A muffled boom rang out as Ming Li's dragon roar fist landed squarely on Huang Liang's face. Huang Liang's nose collapsed, and blood sprayed out of the wound. The terrible force of the fist knocked Huang Liang's head back, breaking his neck into a dozen pieces, and breaking all the nerves and blood vessels in his neck by the terrible force. Huang Liang's vision turned dark, and he lost all consciousness. But, a vast amount of purple mist was constantly fusing into his body. His broken nerves, blood vessels, and bones were healing rapidly, and they were now several times tougher than before. Huang Liang's eyes suddenly lit up, and a boundless killing intent rushed up from his heart. Gripping the hilt of the blade, he gave it a hard twist, then slashed it down. A cracking sound was heard, and Ming Li let out a miserable howl. Huang Liang had cut his chest open, and all the bits and pieces of bezoar and horse jewels in his lower abdomen sprayed out. Hee, Lao Tzu is finally a man today. The blood splashed all over Huang Liang's face. He gritted his teeth and roared, "Bald donkey, Lao Tzu is finally a man today." With his face covered in blood, Huang Liang howled like a wounded wild wolf. He dropped the blade, curled up his body, and threw himself at Ming Li, opening his bloody mouth and biting the monk's neck. His white teeth clenched, and a loud crack rang out as the arteries in Ming Li's neck were broken by Huang Liang's bite. A copious amount of blood sprayed out and was sucked into Huang Liang's mouth. Ming Li shrieked in pain. He was a 9th-tier gold arhat, and one of the most favored disciples of Prabhudaratna Buddha. That was why he was appointed as the missionary disciple of Prabhudaratna Buddha's lineage on Panga continent. In his opinion, it was a piece of cake to deal with the officials and army of De Yuan High Province. But he never dreamed that he would be defeated by an insignificant ant like Huang Liang. He felt a sharp pain, and blood kept spraying out of his mouth. Every drop of blood contained an extremely powerful Buddhist power. Every drop of blood was condensed by monk Mingli, who had painstakingly refined the Arhat golden body with a huge amount of faith power and his own Buddhist power. Blood was gushing out of his broken stomach and his arteries. As the blood gushed out, Mingli felt his vision darken and his body go limp. Howling at the top of his lungs, Mingli was thrown into disorder. He kept punching Huang Liang's body with both fists, breaking his bones inch by inch, and smashing his internal organs into meat paste. Huang Liang's body was so badly mutilated that he looked like a broken meat sack. But this was the most terrifying characteristic of human warriors. Unless their souls were destroyed and their heads were cut off, it was extremely difficult to kill them as long as they were on Panga continent. Huang Liang's battered body was crazily absorbing the purple mist that kept pouring over. His body was broken and repaired, broken and healed. No matter how Mingli beat him, he could not really kill him. Mingli was also in a panic. With his cultivation base and divine abilities, he could shatter Huang Liang's soul with a casual chant, and tear Huang Liang's head off with a casual palm strike. As long as he struck, he could kill Huang Liang completely. But Mingli had forgotten how to deal with human warriors. Instead, he began to compete with Huang Liang with brute force. The two of them tangled together like two mad wild dogs. Huang Liang was scratching, tearing, and gnawing at Mingli's body, while Mingli was hitting, hammering, and biting at Huang Liang's body. Both of them let out hysterical howls as blood and minced flesh kept spraying out from their bodies. It was a hideous scene. All of a sudden, a plume of black flame burst out of the void, accompanied by a dragon roar. Wu Qi leaped out of the burned void with a strange laugh. As soon as he leaped out of the Buddhist kingdom, Wu Qi sensed that Huang Liang's aura had suddenly become 100 times stronger. He turned to look at Huang Liang in amazement, and could not help but give him a thumbs up. This guy is a real man today. Ao Buzan, who was still gnawing on a human leg, also looked at Huang Liang in surprise. Half of the leg had fallen out of his wide-open mouth. Chapter 671. Sure enough, the divine flame of void had the miraculous effect of burning everything in the void. As soon as the black flame appeared, it burned a large hole in the Buddhist kingdom, causing all the restrictive spells of the Buddhist League to lose their effectiveness. The rich Buddhist power leaked out in an instant, and the 300 dragon-headed men and 1 million monks, who were arrogant a moment ago, felt their bodies go limp at the same time. Their cultivation bases dropped abruptly, and it was as if a dragon had turned into a caterpillar. Wu Qi snorted coldly and sprayed out the chaotic light again. A great sheet of light enveloped the entire Buddhist kingdom. The dragon-headed men, the monks, the Buddhist cultivators and kasayas, and the tens of millions of devout believers were all sucked into Wu Qi's interstitial world and suppressed. Ao Buzan was sharp-eyed and quick-witted. From among the countless believers, he picked a few fair-skinned and handsome men and women and swallowed them in one gulp, chewing them with great relish. The bodies of these believers were almost made of flesh and blood, but they were condensed from the power of faith and the power of the Buddhist League. In Ao Buzan's words, the bodies of these believers were fragrant, crisp, and tender, without the slightest fishy smell, and even their bones were crisp and fragrant like lotus roots. They were the best meat dishes in the world. In Ao Buzan's era, when the great figures among the evil immortals held banquets to entertain their guests, they would be too embarrassed to send invitations to their relatives and friends if they did not serve a few believers of the Buddhist kingdom and some dishes cooked by golden arhats. In some secret corners of outer heavenly realms, in the black markets run by the evil immortals, some butchers sold these Buddhist believers as the best meat dishes. Who told these believers in the Buddhist kingdom to have such a fragrant body without a trace of impurities? Moreover, there was powerful spirit chi and soul power contained in them. Only the flesh of those powerful immortal beasts could compare to them. Ao Buzan's words made Wu Qi's eyes shine. It seemed that he had gained a lot this time. Ming Li had dragged him into the Buddhist kingdom and suppressed him, but in the end, he had given him a great benefit. The chaotic light kept spraying out, and soon, the mountain with a circumference of 100,000 miles was dragged into Wu Qi's interstitial world. Even the boundless clear water and lotus leaves were swallowed by Wu Qi. They were quickly digested by the chaotic energy and replenished into Wu Qi's interstitial world. What made Wu Qi happy was that in the temple at the highest point of the mountain, he actually found 8 volumes of Buddhist scriptures, which recorded many good Buddhist cultivation methods, from the most ordinary little monk all the way to the first-grade golden arhat, and even how to condense the bodhisattva lotus throne from the first-grade golden arhat, and how to achieve bodhisattva karma. It was just that the techniques above the bodhisattva realm were missing. This was to be expected. Monk Ming Li's own cultivation was not high. He was now only at the level of a 9th-grade golden arhat. What was the use of the manuals above the bodhisattva realm? After scanning the 8 volumes of Buddhist scriptures with his divine sense and memorizing all the Buddhist mystic techniques, Wu Qi threw them into his interstitial world. Good, very good. Wu Qi was overjoyed. With these cultivation methods, he could use the mystic technique of the 7 foundation elevating technique, catalyze the Buddhist energy with chaotic energy, and cultivate all kinds of Buddhist divine abilities. At that time, he could pretend to be a Buddhist cultivator again. After letting out 3 loud laughs, Wu Qi looted the Buddhist kingdom and put the 108 sariras in the air into his interstitial world, slowly refining them. After that, the divine flame of sky burned through the void, and he flew out with Ao Buzan, who was holding a human leg in his mouth. As soon as he returned to the shore of the ocean, Wu Qi saw Huang Liang entangled with Ming Li like a wild beast. Like 2 wild beasts who had lost their minds, they were fighting each other until their flesh was badly mangled. The situation was extremely tragic. Ming Li, whose overall strength was obviously thousands of times stronger than Huang Liang, was actually suppressed by Huang Liang. Both of them were entangled in an adulterous relationship, sweating profusely and cursing each other. Wu Qi could not help but give Huang Liang a thumbs up and praise him for his bravery. In the distance, Lord Xianqing transmitted his voice to Wu Qi, telling him about Huang Liang's performance just now. He told Wu Qi everything, including how Huang Liang ordered the Dark Armor 8-directional immovable formation to defend against the enemy, and how he did not abandon the soldiers and flee alone, but resolutely attacked Ming Li after the formation was breached by Ming Li. Wu Qi could not help but keep nodding. Huang Liang's performance today was really good. Seeing Huang Liang bite Ming Li's nose and poke his middle fingers into the monk's ears, Wu Qi strode over and gave Ming Li a heavy kick on his ribs. Although Wu Qi was beaten up by the 300 dragon-headed men in the Buddhist kingdom, he had obtained a great benefit. His physical strength had now been enhanced to a level that was beyond common sense. With the kick, half of Ming Li's ribs were shattered. Grabbing Ming Li's neck, Wu Qi pressed down on Huang Liang, who had gone mad, and ordered him to stand aside. Ming Li roared furiously, struggling and cursing crazily. But, Wu Qi grabbed the tendon on his neck with 2 fingers and squeezed it hard. Immediately, the monk became limp like a dead snake, unable to move anymore. Like a gust of wind, Wu Qi thrust out 360 immortal detaining needles, locking all the vital acupoints on Ming Li's body. After that, he pressed his right palm on Ming Li's head and uttered a spell, forming 3 layers of soul-restraining restrictive spells, blocking off Ming Li's last path of escaping with the relic. Huang Liang, who was beaten senseless and had forgotten where he was, howled and tried to pounce on Ming Li again. But Wu Qi's shout woke Huang Liang up. Huang Liang's body was covered in blood, his fingernails were filled with minced meat, his mouth was filled with blood and flesh, and 2 tendons were stuck between his teeth. Only now did he regain his senses. He staggered a few steps backward and sat down on the prow of the flying ship. Laughing foolishly, Huang Liang stared at Wu Qi and said, "Your Excellency, I'm not dead." Wu Qi gave Huang Liang a deep look, nodded and said, "You're not dead. You've done a good job this time. When we get back, I'll reward you with more gold, silver, jewelry, and beautiful girls." After a short pause, Wu Qi threw Ming Li onto the deck and said coolly, "You've done a really good job this time. I'll put you in an important position in the future. Keep your spirits up, for you still have a lot of things to do in the future. Gold, silver, jewelry, and beautiful girls were Huang Liang's favorite things, but when he heard Wu Qi say that he would put him in an important position, Huang Liang's eyes lit up. He knew very well that he was not Wu Qi's trusted subordinate, and the person Wu Qi trusted the most had always been someone else. Ever since he came to East Sea County, Huang Liang had always felt that there was a thick layer of darkness in East Sea County, and he was trapped in the darkness, unable to figure out Wu Qi's background. Now, Wu Qi was going to put him in an important position. Huang Liang rose to his feet, dropped to his knees, and swore to Wu Qi, "I'll assist you with all my heart, Your Excellency. Please rest assured, Your Excellency, I'll be loyal to you in the future." Looking at Huang Liang's behavior, Wu Qi smiled, then gave Ming Li a heavy kick on his face. "Bald donkey, why did you come to East Sea County to pick a fight?" Wu Qi snapped angrily. "Du you is so big, why did you come to East Sea County instead of going somewhere else?" Ming Li stared blankly at Wu Qi, then suddenly cried out in a hoarse voice, You destroyed my Buddhist kingdom in the palm? How is that possible? That's the Buddhist kingdom my master crafted for me. Without the cultivation base of a bodhisattva, how could I destroy it? Could it be that you... Was it the Buddhist kingdom in the palm that monk Ming Li's master crafted for him? Wu Qi nodded to himself. No wonder the atmosphere and scale of the Buddhist kingdom were not at the level of Ming Li, a 9th stage arhat. It was just that everything in the Buddhist kingdom had been plundered by Wu Qi, and the Buddhist kingdom had been completely destroyed. After pondering for a moment, Wu Qi ordered Huang Liang to return to the East Sea City. He transferred thousands of soldiers and sent those who had been knocked unconscious by the Buddhist chants back to the barracks to recuperate. Then, he drove 12 flying ships back to the East Sea City, and then transferred the torturers under Luo Kadi to torture Ming Li. Luo Kadi was a patient, ruthless, and merciless person. During his years under Lu Qingfeng's command, he gradually took charge of the assassins raised by Lu Qingfeng, as well as the dark forces such as lynchings and prisons. Because of his character, he was surrounded by a group of cold-blooded, merciless, and even mentally twisted torture experts. Less than an hour after Wu Qi handed Ming Li over to them, Ming Li, who had been tortured to the point of no longer looking human, completely confessed everything. Ming Li's master was one of the 8 bodhisattvas under Prabhudaratna Buddha, the 7 treasures Golden Bodhisattva Bodhisattva. Prabhudaratna Buddha was famous for forging all kinds of Buddhist artifacts in the Buddhist League, and was a top refining grandmaster in the Buddhist League. Among the 8 personal disciples of Prabhudaratna Buddha, Bodhisattva, the 7 treasures Golden Bodhisattva Bodhisattva. It was thanks to his master that Ming Li was able to form the Buddhist kingdom in his palm with the cultivation base of a 9th-tier arhat. During the war between Myriad Immortal Alliance and Dayu dynasty, the Buddhist League had taken the opportunity to sneak into Pangu continent to recruit believers and expand their territory. Apart from Buddha of Joy, who was behind Madman Shui, the other 7 Buddhas had also sent their emissaries. Prabhudaratna Buddha and Delightful Buddha of Prabhudaratna Buddha were not on good terms with each other in the Buddhist League. Their disciples often had disputes and fights. Therefore, when Madman Shui was preaching in Zhong province, Ming Li also came here eagerly. It was because Madman Shui was preaching in the central province, and he had achieved great results in the past year. Therefore, monk Ming Li purposely came here to undermine Madman Shui's plan. Upon hearing Ming Li's confession, Wu Qi felt a lump in his throat. What does the internal strife of the Buddhist League have to do with Wu Qi's East Sea County? Why did you, a scourge, come here? Ming Li had suffered a great loss in East Sea County, and his Buddhist kingdom in a palm had been destroyed. His master, Bodhisattva, must have sensed it. The fact that the Buddhist League had sent the disciples of 8 Buddhas to preach on Pangu continent should be related to some big plans of the Buddhist League. Perhaps what happened to Ming Li would directly alert Prabhudaratna Buddha, and perhaps one of the Buddhas would sneak into Pangu continent to stand up for his disciples. You're not called a pockmark, you're a fucking scammer. Wu Qi's scalp went numb at the thought of the possible consequences if he were to teach Ming Li a lesson. After pondering for a long time, Wu Qi gritted his teeth. In for a penny, in for a pound. I might as well play with you. Would the Buddhist League dare to openly clash with the officials of Deyu dynasty on Panga continent? If Mingli dares to do so, would Prabhudaratna Buddha, a Buddha of the Buddhist League, whose every word and deed represents the opinion of the Buddhist League, dare to get involved in this muddy water as well? After beheading Mingli and letting Ao Buzan devour his relic, Wu Qi carried the bloody head and led an army of 10,000 soldiers to the field headquarters where Bo Yunting's army was located. Wu Qi was going to join the war again, and at the same time, he was going to put the blame on Mingli's head. The Buddhist League is interfering in the conflict between Myriad Immortal Alliance and Deyu Dynasty. Chapter 672. On the cloud platform, Bo Yunting's tent stood majestically. Dozens of huge airboats were approaching from afar, carrying mountainous amounts of grains, fresh meats, fine wines, medicaments and other supplies. 3 airboats were carrying 7,000 retired veterans who had just been re-enlisted and armed. On a towering peak to the south of the cloud platform, a large sheet of fog had blanketed the land for 10,000 miles around. Vaguely, deafening battle cries and the deep beating of war drums could be heard coming out of the fog. Above the fog, thousands of oracles were chanting spells and performing incantation gestures to disperse the fog. Some of them were surveying the nearby underground energy veins, digging ditches to remove the natural energy supply from the underground energy veins, cutting off the natural energy supply to the formation near the peak. But, the biggest threat to the formation was the 9 red fireballs, each about 100 miles in diameter, hovering high in the sky. Inside the fireballs, which were rolling and emitting threatening heat waves, huge figures that stood tens of miles tall could be vaguely seen. These figures all had 3 heads and 6 arms, but each of them had 3 long legs, each standing on a 9-headed fiery serpent. These hazy figures were singing in a deep voice, and a terrible heat was pouring out of their bodies to form the 9 mighty little suns. Under the control of the 9 huge figures, countless fireballs condensed into about 10 feet thick fire arrows and shot down from the sky. Like raindrops, the fire arrows twisted the air and fell from the sky, dragging a faint light that could be seen with naked eyes. Once they hit the fog formation, the fog within a radius of several miles was immediately evaporated, revealing the mountains and rivers that had been dried up and cracked by the fire. Every now and then, the 9 huge figures would grumble in a deep voice. In front of Bo Yunting's main camp on Cloud Platform, oracles from the Directorate of Celestials were slaughtering captive immortals and oracles on 9 altars, each measuring about 1,000 feet in circumference. Blood essence and souls were constantly being absorbed by the fireballs. Once these fireballs were replenished with blood essence and souls, the intensity and heat of the fireballs suddenly skyrocketed, and the power of the fire arrows they shot out also increased by several times. In the foggy formation, tens of thousands of Great Yu's soldiers, led by hundreds of golden-armored captains, were fighting a group of immortals with long sleeves. Among the hundreds of golden-armored generals, there were more than 100 who had reached the realm of second Panga heaven, and their cultivation bases were comparable to gold immortals, while a similar number of gold immortals were fighting against them. In addition to the nearly 100 gold immortals, there were also hundreds of heaven immortals, and tens of thousands of itinerant cultivators, such as nascent divinity, nascent soul, and Jin Dan cultivators. On the towering peak behind these immortals, a large number of immortals were deploying formations to shroud the void in all directions. The number of immortals and itinerant cultivators near the mountain was even greater than the army led by Bo Yunting. Clearly, this mountain was an important stronghold of Myriad Immortal Alliance. Otherwise, it would not have been guarded by so many gold immortals and heaven immortals, nor so many itinerant cultivators. On the other hand, the foggy formation was able to separate Bo Yunting's army from his vanguard, and no matter how hard the oracles tried to attack it, they could not break it. It showed how extraordinary the formation was. As was common in the battle between the Great Yu army and the Immortals, Deyu's soldiers charged forward like a tide, while the Immortals unleashed all kinds of magical treasures. All kinds of flying swords, magical treasures, talismans, and thunderbolts came whistling down. Wearing helmets and armors, the soldiers of Deyu fought head-on against the magic of the Immortals with the protection of the oracles. Every time they charged, a large group of soldiers would be knocked away by the flying swords and magical treasures, and many more would be injured by the immortal talismans and thunderbolts. But their strong fleshly bodies and excellent armors, as well as the magical spells of the oracles, made these soldiers feel no pain, no fear, and no fatigue. Even if their arms were chopped off and their bodies were blown to pieces, as long as they could still move, they would continue to charge forward without fear. The fog eroded the restrictive spells on these Du soldiers, and as a result, the vanguard army of Zhong province had been trapped in the fog formation for a day and a night, and the restrictive spells on them had begun to weaken. The lingering fog kept seeping into the hazy halo around them, weakening their defenses layer by layer. All of a sudden, a strong light burst out from the restrictive spells on a team of 100 soldiers, and the defensive spells on them were broken by the continuous attacks and the invasion of the fog. Immediately, a dozen ghost immortals, clad in black robes and shrouded in a ghostly aura, rushed out from the crowd of immortals in front of them. Holding white bone banners in their hands and wearing small copper bells on their little fingers, the immortals in black waved the white bone banners and touched the copper bells with their fingers for a while. Immediately, the howling of ghosts accompanied by the ringing of the copper bells rang out. The captain and his soldiers screamed at the same time. Wisps of white smoke spurted out from their 7 orifices, then they fell to the ground and lost their breath. The ghost immortals burst out laughing, their laughter sounding like the howls of ghosts and very unpleasant to the ears. The leader, a golden-armored general, who was a 3 stars realm cultivator in the second Pangu heaven, flew into a rage. Taking advantage of the moment when these ghost immortals rushed out of the formation, he flashed to their side and thrust his halberd down. The sound of flesh being pierced was ear-piercing. The dozen or so immortals in black did not even have time to scream before their bodies were riddled with at least 70 to 80 see-through holes. Especially the heavy blow between their eyebrows, even their immortal souls were shattered. Before the golden-armored general could retreat to the army, 3 gold immortals, who were of the same cultivation base as him, came whistling out. 3 sword beams, 1 gold, 1 purple, and 1 red, swept down with cold air and entangled the golden-armored general. Following them were 7 golden-purple immortal talismans, each about 12 feet long, and dozens of fist-sized thunderbolts that glinted with a misty white light that looked like sharp thorns. The sword beams hacked on the general's armor, making it clanging noises. 7 spirit talismans sealed off the general's way of retreat. Earth, water, fire, wind, and all sorts of elemental energies swept out, wrapping the general in the air like an oven and burning him in an area with a radius of about 1 mile. The dozens of thunderbolts approached the general like lightning bolts, and then exploded at the same time. The 7 immortal talismans restrained the explosive force of the thunderbolts to a narrow area less than 10 feet around the general, and as a result, the power of the thunderbolts increased by more than 10 times. The general gave a muffled snort as his armor shattered. Suddenly, numerous runes burst out of his battle robe and transformed into a light armor that wrapped around his body. But, the light armor was also destroyed by the continuous attacks. The battle robe, densely embroidered with countless runes to form the pattern of mountains and rivers, could only emit a strong light to barely block the attacks from the outside world, while all the attacks fell on the general at the same time. Flesh and blood flew in all directions, while bones and tendons were broken. The general, who was in the 3 stars realm of the second Pangu heaven a moment ago, was now twisted and deformed by the explosion. He retreated hastily, covered in blood. Du's battle formation made way for him to flee into the formation. But, as soon as he rushed back, he fell to the ground. His left arm was broken, his spine was broken into 3 pieces, and his flesh and blood were torn apart by the shock, causing blood to spurt out of his body. Fortunately, the fleshly body of the human race was countless times stronger than diamond. If an ordinary gold immortal were hit by such an attack, he would have long been reduced to ashes. Even so, the general had lost his ability to move when he rushed back into the battle formation. A few of his bodyguards rushed out and poured a large amount of medicinal liquid and pills into his mouth, then applied ointments all over his body. The joint attack of 3 gold immortals immediately made one of Du's generals lose his ability to fight. The morale of the immortals soared. A white-bearded gold immortal, who was presiding over the formation on the mountain behind them, laughed out loud. He kept unleashing thunderbolts from his palms to shake the dozens of flags in front of him, causing the fog formation that covered an area of 10,000 miles to change again. The water vapor in the fog grew denser and denser. As a result, a great deal of green energy began to pour out of the fog. In the blink of an eye, the green energy condensed into wooden stakes that were tens of feet in diameter and about a mile long. The azure spirit chi violently rubbed against the wooden stakes. Immediately, a large expanse of azure lightning sprayed out from the wooden stakes. Deafening thunderclaps resounded, and countless bolts of lightning wrapped around the thousands of wooden stakes bombarded the army's formation. Dozens of Dayu soldiers, who were charging out of the formation, were caught off guard by the sudden change. As the huge wooden stakes smashed down, the power of lightning shot out in all directions and knocked several groups of soldiers to the ground. The lightning and fire shattered the restrictive spells and armors they wore, and the soldiers howled miserably as they were burned to ashes by the lightning and fire. Through the deliberate amplification of the formation, the miserable howls of Dayu soldiers before they died could be heard clearly by the generals and officers of Dayu near the main tent on the cloud platform. Many of the high-ranking generals of Dayu were enraged when they heard that, and some of them rushed into the tent, dropping to their knees and asking for permission to fight. Sitting high up behind the table, Bo Yunting looked coldly at these generals with a gloomy face. The vanguard of 30,000 soldiers has been trapped. Do you still want to send the spoils of war to those rebels? With a cold snort, Bo Yunting clenched his jaws and said, "No one is allowed to lead the army into battle until this formation is cracked. Those who disobey will be punished by military law." Wu Qi came to Bo Yunting's main tent with an army of 10,000 soldiers, ready to receive the commander's token and rejoin the battle against Myriad Immortal Alliance. He left the army on the cloud platform and was led into the tent by a few heralds, preparing to report to Bo Yunting that he had recovered from his injury and had returned to the army. Upon hearing Bo Yunting's rebuke, Wu Qi glanced at the unsightly faces of the generals who asked for permission to fight, as well as the shrill howls coming out of the fog outside. An idea immediately came to his mind. If one were to say that the formation outside was difficult to break, these generals and soldiers would have a hard time doing so. After all, they did not know much about the formations of the immortals. Even among the oracles of the Directorate of Celestials, very few of them had studied the formations of the immortals. Whether it was the army of Dayu or the oracles of the Directorate of Celestials, they preferred to destroy everything that stood in their way with tremendous force, just like the 9 huge fireballs that were spewing raging flames in the sky outside. If given enough time, these fiend gods invited from outer heavenly realms could even burn the mountain and the formation to ashes. But they needed time. By the time they broke the formation, the 30,000 soldiers would have long been killed or wounded. Wu Qi, on the other hand, could see that the formation outside was riddled with holes. It was nothing more than a combination of 5 maze formations and a thunder formation of 5 elements. According to the diagrams of formations found in the Scroll of Stealing, the level of this formation was the level used by an ordinary mid-tier heaven immortal to protect his cave abode. Rolling his eyes, Wu Qi cupped his fist and bowed to Bo Yunting, then asked for permission to fight. "Military Minister, I, Tan Lang, have just recovered from my injury, and I ask for permission to break the formation." After pondering for a brief moment, Wu Qi bowed to Bo Yunting again and said, "When I was wiping out an itinerant cultivator named Reverend Yao Yu in my territory, I found a scroll containing the formation diagram of the 5 elements nested thunder maze formation outside. I have full confidence in breaking it." Bo Yunting was taken aback. Then, he jumped to his feet in ecstasy and burst into laughter. "Good. If you can really break the formation and kill these rebels, I'll give you a great merit, and I'll personally ask for a reward for you." Wu Qi narrowed his eyes and agreed without hesitation. Chapter 673. While Wu Qi volunteered to attack the alliance of 10,000 immortals formation in Bo Yunting's headquarters, Princess Zhang Lu was busy in Anle County. In the mountains 3,000 miles southwest of Anhe City, several mountaintops were moved away by Han Fei with the mountain drinking technique. Standing on the white cloud, Han Fei, who was clad in a linen robe unique to Dayu, gave a light cry. Immediately, the 8 mountains that were tightly clustered together slowly wriggled in 8 directions like mollusks that had come to life, revealing a flat land with a circumference of 100 miles. Each of the 8 mountains was over 100,000 feet tall. Following Han Fei's order, they slowly protected the flat land according to the position of the 8 trigrams. At the same time, the surrounding mountains and valleys gradually changed their topography. Vaguely, there were 360 mountains surrounding the 8 trigrams formation formed by the 8 mountains according to the position of the stars in the sky. As the mountains wriggled, they gradually changed their positions, but everything was done silently. Although they were moving, they did not make any sound. When Han Fei performed the mountain drinking technique, it gave people a sense of tranquility and gentleness. Even the insects on the mountain didn't sense the changes in the mountain. They were still happy and unfettered in their own little world. When Han Fei moved the mountains away, Sun Kuang stepped on a white cloud and flew over the flat land. With a pale purple jade scroll in his hand, he murmured a few incantations in a low voice, and the earth veins under the mountains quickly rushed toward the flat land. 360 huge spirit veins were roaring underground like giant dragons. Soon, they were connected to the roots of the 360 mountains in the periphery. When these energy veins were perfectly fused with the mountains under Sun Kuang's great power, the 360 mountains slowly released energy that was 100 times more abundant than before. The flowers, birds, insects, fishes, and all the other creatures on and off the mountains all cheered. Su Qin, who was an expert in the art of stars, flew up into the sky with a smile, until he reached the highest altitude he could reach. He formed a seal with both hands and carefully drew down the power of the stars from the 9 heavens, turning it into an endless silver rain that sprinkled down. The 360 towering mountains were connected to the power of the stars in the sky. Instantly, these mountains were all shrouded in starlight, and a layer of dense purple mist and silver light covered these mountains like flowing water. Princess Zhanglu was riding on a 5-colored cloud, flying across mountains. Wherever she passed, the rocks, sand, and dust in the mountains were all refined by the 5-colored divine flame. The originally messy mountains were refined by the divine flame, turning into a pure, glass-like texture. Princess Zhongli's powerful divine sense penetrated into these mountains, directly pulling out the rare metals within the mountains, and outlined countless nested rune-arrayed discs within the mountains. After Princess Zhonglu flew past these seemingly ordinary mountains, they immediately gave off a completely different feeling. Originally, these mountains were just ordinary mountains, but now, at a glance, they looked like bonsai carved out of supreme-grade jade. A strong and vigorous aura spread faintly, and these mountains had been fundamentally changed. The rune-arrayed discs within the 360 mountains were connected to each other, and the 360 huge energy veins were intertwined and fused together. A mighty formation was slowly taking shape under the joint efforts of everyone. But, this was not the end of the formation. The real killer move of the formation was in the 8 mountains that stood tens of thousands of feet tall in the center. When the 360 mountains in the periphery were ready, they worked together to extract 8 huge immortal veins from the depths of Panga continent and fuse them into the 8 mountains. The 8 immortal veins stretched for hundreds of millions of miles, and were the origin of 1/3 of the energy veins in Zhong province. When they were forcibly joined together, the 8 mountains in the center immediately emitted a dazzling light. The impurities in the mountains were washed away in an instant, leaving behind a pure texture that looked like pearls and jade. Fortunately, Yan Dan was sitting in the sky and had concealed the situation in this part of the mountain range with the disk of heavenly Tao transmigration. Otherwise, when the 8 mountains emitted the towering light, they would look like 8 huge lighthouses, and would have been discovered long ago. Fortunately, Wu Qi had controlled the item spirit in the Panga's map, so no one could find out any changes in the energy veins in Zhong province without his consent. Otherwise, the sudden change in the origin of 1/3 of the energy veins in Zhong province would immediately attract the army of Zhong province. Su Qin struck again in the sky. This time, he did not attract the light of the stars, but the terrible true flame of the sun. The pale red true flame of the sun, which looked like melted glass, sprinkled down silently from the sky and merged with the 8 mountains. The mountains melted, and the rolling magma slowly slid down the steep slopes that Han Fei had created on purpose, forming a lava lake with a circumference of 100 miles on the flat ground between the 8 mountains. Carefully, he controlled the mountains around him. For every inch the 8 mountains melted, he would make the mountains rise by 1 foot. For every foot the mountains melted, he would make the mountains rise by 10 feet. After 1 day and 1 night, the 8 mountains were melted thousands of feet high, but the mountains had risen to 18,000 feet high. Nourished by the rich immortal energy in the underground immortal veins and tempered by the true flame of the sun, the 8 mountains had become 10,000 times harder than diamonds, and 10,000 times more delicate and beautiful than jade. Princess Zhanglu stood in the middle of the lava lake, with the 5-colored divine ray sweeping out from her back like 5 flood dragons, carving countless runes and spells on the inside and outside of the 8 mountains. Little Kaer stood on Princess Zhongli's shoulder, flapping her wings excitedly and spraying out balls of Nanming flame. The true flame of the sun and Nanming flame merged into one, and under Little Kaer's control, they turned into a brand new innate divine flame, which possessed an extremely magical power and an incredible power. Only the Phoenix clan could control fire like this. It was an innate ability of these divine birds, just like how the great gale could control the storms between the heaven and earth. The flames on the 8 mountains were restrained, condensing into a huge fireball with a diameter of tens of miles in the belly of each mountain. Boundless immortal chi kept fusing into the 8 fireballs, gradually increasing the power of the 8 fireballs. Because of the countless runes and spells carved by Princess Zhanglu, not even the slightest flame could leak out from the 8 mountains. After Jing Ku and the other captains brought many disciples of Mo sect and planted a large amount of flowers, plants, and trees on the mountains, the 8 mountains were once again filled with greenery and vitality. High up in the sky, Sun Kuang and a few other Grandmaster experts joined hands and exerted their power once again. 81 energy veins of pure fire element were forcibly drawn over from afar and fused into the ground of the lava lake, forcibly creating a huge underground spirit cave of fire element. The fire element energy in this place had reached a frightening level, and the underground temperature could be compared to that of an ordinary small star. The lava lake began to explode and expand. Just as a 100 miles in diameter pillar of flame was about to erupt, Mod flicked his sleeve, and the Mo city, which had expanded to 100 miles in circumference, flew out, transforming into a dark cloud that pressed down slowly. 8 lofty mountains, which contained an inexhaustible power of fire, and 360 lofty mountains, which contained immense power of stars, simultaneously burst out a large sheet of rainbow light that wrapped around Mo city, shielding it as it slowly descended to the ground, forcibly pushing back the fiery column that had burst out from the ground. With a muffled noise, countless black metal chains stretched out from within Mo city, their length seemingly endless. They plunged into the surrounding mountains, communicating with the energy core formed within the mountains as one. A long alloy spike, measuring 10,000 miles in length and as thick as a thumb, slowly thrust out from the center of the city, piercing through the lava lake and the thick rock layer, all the way into the deepest underground spirit cave of fire element. A dazzling flame burst out from Mo city, while an enormous energy surged through the countless energy passages in the city. The lifeless, pitch-black metal city suddenly came to life, and muffled mechanical noises could be heard coming from everywhere. Numerous huge war machines and various metal puppets, such as dragons, phoenixes, tigers, leopards, and many others, came out from their hiding places, wandering back and forth on the city walls. Everyone breathed a sigh of relief when they saw that Mo city had successfully rooted its foundation in the mountains. Great Yen was going to lay a foundation on Panga continent. While it was easy to provide food and pay, the soldiers needed a large number of armors and weapons. With the strength of the various powers on Panga continent, Great Yan's soldiers needed a large number of armors and weapons of the grade of heaven immortal items. A safe and stable forging base that could provide an astronomical number of heaven immortal items was indispensable. Fortunately, Great Yen had one more convenient condition than the other 5 dynasties. Mod and Mo sect were in Great Yen, and Mo sect was in Great Yen. Mo sect was famous for forging all kinds of exquisite tools. As long as Mod was given enough materials and time, he could forge any armors, weapons, or war machines. Now, Mo City had successfully rooted its foundation here. With the protection of the two great formations, it was as stable as Mount Tai, and no longer feared any invasion. Coupled with the support of the enormous natural energy, immortal energy, and fire element energy, it was the most convenient place to forge any kind of immortal item. Not only would this be the armory center of Great Yen in the future, but also the armors and weapons of Wu Qi's underhand sect and East Sea County would come from here. Moreover, the land tens of thousands of miles around Mo City was surrounded by hundreds of huge mountains. Such a vast area could be used as a training base for Great Yen soldiers. With such a vast area, as long as there was a sufficient supply of food and fodder, it could feed hundreds of millions of soldiers. With the fertile farmland of Anle County and Anyi County, there was no need to worry about the lack of food and fodder. After the formation was laid out, Sun Quan, Su Qin, Han Fei, and Princess Zhang Lu joined forces to construct countless illusory formations, maze formations, and trap formations within tens of thousands of miles. All the formations were nested into a hole with the two great formations in the center. The Formation Eye, which was also the core magical treasure that controlled the operation of the whole formation, was Yen Dan's prime magical artifact, the Disk of Heavenly Tao Transmigration. And this complex nested formation was named Endless Transmigration by the emperor and courtiers of Great Yen. Once one stepped into the formation, he or she would be trapped in the transmigration. This was the original meaning of the name. After a long time of work, with the joint efforts of the emperor and courtiers of Great Yen, the forest was finally taken care of. Just as everyone was clapping and laughing and celebrating their success, someone from scouting office came with a secret report. In Anle County and Anyi County, some Buddhist cultivators were found secretly preaching and recruiting believers. Some secret agents of scouting office followed these Buddhist cultivators to keep an eye on them, but their legs were broken and they were thrown into the street. Chapter 674. Two fat monks, Ming Zhen and Ming Xing, were walking on the streets of Anhe City, staggering with each step. They were carrying a huge wooden fish cast from pure gold in their left hands, and a long wooden fish hammer forged from pure silver in their right hands. Every few steps they took, they would lightly knock on the wooden fish, producing a sonorous and jarring sound. The residents of Anhe City were staring cautiously at these two strange men, who were dressed very differently from the people of Diyu. Their bald heads and huge, fair bellies surprised the residents even more. No matter if they were of noble birth, high or low status, men or women, old or young, very few people of Great Yu had such a fat body. How could those ordinary people, who came from humble backgrounds, who had to plow the fields and graze the animals, cut firewood and carry water, fish and hunt to feed their families? How could they be fat? Regardless of whether they were men or women, the descendants of influential clans would practice a certain body-tempering technique, and it was even rarer to see a fat man. If they had the aptitude to practice magic, they would be chosen by the Directorate of Celestials to learn all kinds of strange magic. The oracles who dealt with ghosts and deities under the heaven would often feed all kinds of evil ghosts and deities with their own blood essence and souls, or use their blood essence as the primer to launch all kinds of magic. With that, those oracles would be as skinny as a stick. How could they look so fair and chubby? If the people of Diyu came from ordinary clans, they would have a simple and honest air, like the great trees in the mountains, or the boulders in the fields. Those who came from influential clans might be proud and domineering, but they would never have the carefree and leisurely air of these two monks, who seemed to have no worries about anything. The ancient architectural style of Anhe City, as well as the pitch-black, square-shaped palaces and pavilions, did not match well with these two monks, who were clad in monk robes made of fine cloth, sandals made of fine grass, silk belts tied around their waists, and wooden fish held in their hands in a splendid manner. They were two unusual people who had intruded into Anhe City. Along the way, the people were sizing them up with great caution. No one talked to them, and no one dared to get close to them. Everyone was staring at them with an indifferent look, as if they were thousands of miles away from them. Ming Zhen and Ming Xing glanced left and right with a smile on their faces. They did not take the cold attitude of the people in Anhe City seriously. Just now, a few spies with low cultivation bases dared to follow them. Although they had also practiced the body tempering technique of great use military, with their shallow cultivation bases, their arms could only carry a force of about 10,000 kilograms, and they could be considered as experts among mortals. But, Ming Zhen and Ming Xing were both gold arhats with accomplished cultivation bases, 10th-tier arhats, and had also practiced the mighty divine ability of the Buddhist League, the evil subduing dragon, which gave them the power to overturn rivers and seas with a flip of their hands. They were just a few ants, so it was better to break their legs and throw them on the road. The city in front of them was very good. Although the dark buildings made people feel uncomfortable, the people here were not bad. A few years ago, it was said that the disciples of the Buddhist League had infiltrated this area, and had even opened a Taoist rite temple nearby, built a mountain gate, and recruited many believers. But, when the war broke out, the immortals of the Fiend League from outer heavenly realms also built their own power here. The conflict between the two sides gave the officials of Dayu army an advantage. Now, the city and its people were under the control of the officials of Dayu army. It was a pity that the hundreds of years of hard work of the sons of Buddhas had gone to waste. But, things were different now. Since the Lord Buddha had made the decision to infiltrate Pangu continent completely, and the 8 Buddhas had sent their disciples into Pangu continent at the same time to preach, there was no need for them to develop so cautiously. They could use their glib tongues to persuade the local people of Anlu County, and make them obediently join the Buddhist League and become devout believers. Ming Zhen and Ming Xing exchanged a glance and burst into laughter at the same time. The flesh on their fair cheeks twitched a few times, and they shouted the name of Prabhudaratna Buddha at the same time. Moving their lips and tongues, they began to talk about the benefits of joining the Buddhist League in an extravagant manner. Droplets of saliva sprayed out of their mouths and fell to the ground with a faint golden gleam. Immediately, a sheet of golden light burst out of the ground, amidst which white lotus flowers sprayed out. Only bodhisattvas could possess the cultivation base of bodhisattvas. But, as Ming Zhen and Ming Xing were chosen to preach on Pangu continent, their eloquence was also top-notch among the many golden arhats who served Prabhudaratna Buddha. Bodhisattvas could emit golden lotuses from their mouths, but they could also emit white lotuses from their mouths. The ground was covered with lotus flowers, the air was filled with fragrance, and all kinds of wonderful scenes had enveloped in his city. The 2 monks unleashed their willpower, triggering the thoughts of the millions of people in the city. The 7 emotions were stirred at the same time, and the 6 evils were unleashed. Under the guidance of the 2 monks, countless illusions appeared before the eyes of the people of Anhi city. High up in the sky, there were heavenly dragons dancing in the sky, celestial maidens scattering flowers, Bodhi trees, and boundless lotus flowers. Many Buddhas and Bodhisattvas sat cross-legged among them, and millions of believers lived in gorgeous houses and palaces, enjoying fine wine, delicious food, beautiful women, and handsome men. Celestial maidens as beautiful as flowers and jade-like celestial maidens, tall and mighty guardians of the Dharma, and whenever those believers needed something, these strange creatures would immediately possess them. Separated by a dense layer of auspicious clouds, under the beautiful heaven were 18 layers of horrible hell. Tongues were pulled out, tendons were pulled out, tendons were pulled out, skin was peeled off, and there were mountains of blades, forests of spears, and even seas of fire and icebergs. All kinds of tortures were described, and all of them made one shudder with fear. If one believed in Prabhudaratna Buddha, he would be taken to the Mahasvara Buddhist kingdom after death, where he would enjoy endless blessings. However, if one did not believe in Prabhudaratna Buddha, it would be a great disrespect to the Buddha, accumulating endless evil karma, and he would definitely fall into hell after death, never to be reincarnated. If one believed in Prabhudaratna Buddha, he would be rewarded with blessings when he was alive, and his family would be safe and sound, without sickness or disaster. If one did not believe in Prabhudaratna Buddha, he would be rewarded with evil karma when he was alive. Men would lose their wives, women would lose their husbands, children would die prematurely, and so on. All kinds of unlucky karma would be involved. 2 monks were standing at the crossroads in the center of Anhi city, flicking their 3-inch tongues and spitting out tiny white lotus flowers. The scene was filled with all sorts of strange phenomena and wonderful sounds, causing the people in Anhui City to feel their hearts and souls ripple uncontrollably. Back then, Anhui City had been under the control of Buddhist cultivators for several hundred years. Although the ascetic cultivators of Buddhist League did not manage to build a solid foundation in the city, the various Buddhist scriptures and meditation techniques they preached still influenced many people. The cultivators of Buddhist League who controlled Anhui City in those years were merely nascent soul cultivators. But now, 2 10th-tier golden arhats had appeared in Anhui City. They could be considered as the core members of the Buddhist League, and they had been practicing all kinds of divine abilities in tongues. How could the people in Anhui City resist them? In just less than 8 minutes, many people in Anhui City had dropped to their knees, kowtowing to the 2 monks while chanting the name of Prabhupada Buddha. The few streets in Anhui City were packed with people, all of whom were kowtowing to the 2 monks as if they were intoxicated. Their eyes were cloudy, and they looked like a dog that had been smacked in the face with a brick. Ming Zhen and Ming Xing smiled complacently at each other. Their skin and flesh were shivering, and waves of fat were rolling up and down their bodies. Mustering all the Buddhist power they had, they kept waving their tongues and spraying out large amounts of saliva. Specks of golden light wrapped in white lotus flowers filled the entire Anhui City. The 2 monks danced and danced at the crossroads, while specks of Buddhist light flew out of their bodies and sprinkled on the people who were worshipping them. The white hair of the old men turned black, the sick young men were cured, and the healthy ones felt a warm current rolling through their bodies. The energy they had spent on their women last night was suddenly fully restored. The old women straightened their backs, feeling no more soreness in their bodies, while the young women were pleasantly surprised to find that some of the freckles and scars on their bodies had disappeared without a trace. Blessings. This is the blessings of believing in the Buddha. The 2 monks roared at the top of their lungs. Their saliva had almost dried up. While the 2 monks were busy preaching the teachings of the Buddhist League, deep and powerful footsteps were heard coming from all directions, sounding like the rumbling of thunder from Chi-Chi. One by one, the people who had been worshipping on the streets were captured by soldiers clad in leather armors and forcibly brought to the shops and houses along the streets. Troops of soldiers armed with strong bows and crossbows and clad in heavy metal armors came marching in from all directions. Their eyes were firm, and their faces were expressionless. Their movements were in perfect unison, as if they were one person. Clearly, they were all elites who had been through hundreds of battles. The 2 monks, Ming Zhen and Ming Xing, were stunned. Anhui County was just a county in Zhong Province. According to Dayu's military establishment, for a first-grade county with a large population and a developed economy, the military prince would at most have 2,000 to 3,000 soldiers. Anhui County could only have 2,000 to 3,000 soldiers at most. But now, when the 2 monks scanned the surroundings with their divine will, they found that there were at least 5 soldiers in the entire Anhui City. Among them, 40,000 were forcing the people who were worshipping them into the houses along the streets, while the other 10,000 were controlling the area 2 miles in circumference, with the 2 monks as the center. These 10,000 heavily armored soldiers were armed with strong crossbows, and the arrows on their bows were emanating faint ripples of energy. The strange and agile ripples of energy made the 2 monks' faces flicker. They were powerful crossbows made by experts in artifact crafting, and could pose a threat to even heaven immortals. Even though the 2 monks had the golden bodies of arhats, they dared not to take the volley of 10,000 crossbows head-on. In the past, many immortals, who were conceited about their divine abilities, had attacked the Great Yu army alone. As a result, all the immortals who dared to do so were riddled with sieves by the rain of arrows fired by Dayu's army. Realizing that something was not right, the 2 monks chanted the name of Buddha together, then stepped onto a cloud and flew away without saying a word. It was just that they suddenly remembered that Anhui County was once controlled by Buddhist cultivators, and that was why they came here to take advantage of the situation and show their faces in front of their fellow disciples. They did not expect that Anhui City would suddenly become like a hedgehog. Just as they were preaching here, an army was sent to besiege them. However, when they had just flown several hundred feet into the air, a 5-colored divine ray came sweeping down from the sky. Princess Zhang Li's cold and merciless voice echoed through the entire Anhui City. Kill these 2 bald donkeys. As for the others, their taxes will be increased by 10 times this year. Ming Zhen and Ming Xing's Buddhist energy weakened abruptly, and they fell from the sky like mortals. Followed by a series of popping noise, countless arrows swooshed over, covering the bodies of Ji Hao and Si Wenming with shreds of afterimages. Chapter 675. While Princess Zhanglu was killing 2 preaching monks in Anhui City, Wu Qi had taken out Ming Li's head from Bo Yunting's main tent. A small golden sandalwood box was stuffed with all kinds of medicinal powders made from various spices. Ming Li's fat head was stuffed inside the box. He grimaced in pain and died with his eyes wide open, looking extremely fierce. His dead fish-like eyes still reflected a trace of ferocious light. Bo Yunting was struck dumb. Just now, Wu Qi volunteered to crack the formation outside, and Wu Qi said that he had a 100% chance of doing so, which made Bo Yunting very happy. But, after receiving the token, Wu Qi did not leave. Instead, he took out a human head. What was he trying to do? Bo Yunting rose to his feet, walked up to Wu Qi, and studied Ming Li's head for a while. A Buddhist cultivator? He asked with a frown. Wu Qi lowered his head slightly and answered in a deep voice, he is a Buddhist cultivator. His Buddhist name is Ming Li, and he sneaked into the East Sea County of Hai Province with a group of rebels from Myriad Immortal Alliance. The rebels of Myriad Immortal Alliance abducted beautiful girls of certain birthdays in the East Sea County as cultivation vessels, and Ming Li took the opportunity to preach his Buddhist doctrine in the villages and towns where most of the girls were lost. Bo Yunting's face twitched, and a fierce gleam of anger flashed in his eyes. He clenched his teeth and said, do they want to repeat what happened in the past? He, father is right. These cultivators, whether they are Taoists or monks, have never given up on killing me, do you? He patted Wu Qi on the shoulder and promised that he would immediately report the matter to Bo Zhongfu, the prefecture overseer of Zhong province, in an urgent document, and mobilize a reserve army to guard against the Buddhist cultivators. At the same time, Bo Yunting praised Wu Qi for killing Ming Li, and counted it as a great military contribution and added it to Wu Qi's record. Wu Qi cupped his fist and bowed to Bo Yunting, then walked out of the tent with the token in his hand. A few heralds sounded the bugle and passed down the order from Wu Qi, who was holding the token. At his command, in addition to the 10,000 soldiers he had brought with him, Bo Yunting had also mobilized 1,000 formidable generals and soldiers to serve under him. The weakest of these soldiers had the cultivation base of 5 stars realm of the first Panga heaven, while the strongest had the cultivation base of 3 stars realm of the second Panga heaven. With these soldiers, he did not have to worry that the immortals of the Immortal Alliance would suddenly rush out of the mountains ahead to disrupt his formation. Apart from these 1,000 elite soldiers, Wu Qi also deployed a Jade Armor Dark Turtle flying ship. The Dark Turtle flying ship was perfectly round from top to bottom, and it was made from the shell of a Jade Armor Dark Turtle, which lived in the Great East Ocean on Panga continent. They were born with the cultivation base of Heaven Immortals, and when they reached adulthood, they would have the overall strength of peak-level Gold Immortals. When they reached adulthood, their bodies were fixed to be 81 miles long and 36 miles wide, and their shells were naturally protected by 64 layers of exquisite runes, giving them an amazing defense. Every 10,000 years, the powerful oracles of Dayu's Directorate of Celestials would hunt and kill a batch of Yu, using their shells to craft all kinds of magical artifacts. After being refined with medicinal liquid, the Yu had grown to be 8 miles and 150 feet long and 6 miles and 900 feet wide, with 3 layers of specially made alloy armor on the outside. Together with the protection of 64 layers of runes on the shell, there were more than 100 layers of defense on the whole body, which was strong enough to withstand a series of heavy blows from a peak-level Gold Immortal, and even several attacks from a Primordial Immortal who had just stepped into the realm of Primordial. The Jade Armor Dark Turtle flying ships were great used strategic weapons. If Bo Zhongfu had not been a close subject of the human emperor and had a very deep network of connections in the imperial court, he would not have brought 3 of them with him when he took office. As the only beloved son of Bo Zhongfu, Bo Yunting kept 2 Jade Armor Dark Turtle flying ships in the warehouse of his main tent. Bo Zhongfu was afraid that Bo Yunting might be defeated one day, or encounter a dangerous situation like the star attack launched by a gold immortal in Ningbo City. So, he had asked Bo Yunting to bring them with him to protect his life. Just now, when Wu Qi asked Bo Yunting for a weapon that could guarantee the safety of all his soldiers, Bo Yunting generously gave Wu Qi one of the 2 flying ships. This flying boat was large enough to accommodate 10,000 people. Be it in terms of attack or defense, it was top-notch. It was perfect for attacking the great formation outside. After that, he brought the Jade Armor Dark Turtle flying ship to him, then brought out a large number of flaming thunders from the warehouse. These flaming thunders were refined by the oracles of the Directorate of Celestials by collecting the poisonous flame from the Earth's core. Once they were triggered, everything within 10 miles around them would be reduced to ashes. On top of that, they would erupt with poisonous flame, which was extremely hot and poisonous. Even heaven immortals would rarely be able to fight them head-on. However, it was not easy to refine these flaming thunders, and as the oracles preferred to deal with ghosts and deities, few of them were willing to work hard to refine them for the army. As a result, Bo Yunting only had about 3,000 of them in his warehouse, and Wu Qi brought out 1,500 of them at once. In addition to these flaming thunders, Wu Qi also brought out dozens of powerful bone talismans that could trigger the eruption of underground fire and turn a plain into a volcano. These bone talismans were pieced together from the strongest and strongest bones of fire elemental demon beasts. Each of them was tens of feet long and wide, and about a foot thick. Those with insufficient cultivation base could not activate such huge bone talismans. But once they were successfully activated, 9 flaming dragons would shoot out of them and sweep in all directions. Wherever the flaming dragons flew past, the ground would immediately collapse and erupt with underground fire, turning hundreds of miles of plain into a boundless volcano. Immediately after that, Wu Qi passed down a military order, ordering the oracles who were sacrificing to the 9 giant ghosts and deities in the sky to follow his orders. As soon as anything happened on the east side of the dense fog formation, the 9 fiend gods would immediately focus all their firepower in that direction. After dispersing the mist on the east side, they would immediately focus their firepower on the mountains on the west side of the dense fog formation. They had to reduce those mountains to ashes as quickly as possible, and the formation would be broken. After that, Wu Qi assigned tasks to the few military officers. The army brought by Bo Yunting, together with the 7,000 newly armed veterans, had a total of about 80,000 soldiers. All the soldiers had to be prepared. Once the formation was broken, they had to concentrate their forces and attack from the west. At that time, Wu Qi would lead the army from the inside and attack from the west. Together, they would definitely be able to defeat the immortals of the Myriad Immortal Alliance. In addition to the 80,000 soldiers, Wu Qi also asked Bo Yunting to personally lead 20 to 30 of the strongest generals to guard the eastern sky of the formation. Once they encountered someone breaking out of the formation from the east, they would immediately besiege that person. Wu Qi clearly told Bo Yunting and the others that once someone broke out of the formation from the east, it must be the strongest among the immortals of the Myriad Immortal Alliance. Bo Yunting had to be careful. Bo Yunting was helpless against the fog formation in front of him. He did not know what Wu Qi's intention was, but he had one good thing about him: he never pretended to know things he did not know. He regarded himself as Wu Qi's subordinate, and wholeheartedly mobilized the army according to Wu Qi's orders. In less than an hour, all the troops directly under Bo Yunting's command had been mobilized. According to Wu Qi's order, it was very likely that a very powerful immortal would show up in the east of the formation. Therefore, Bo Yunting shamelessly moved the other Jade Armor Dark Turtle flying ship dozens of miles east of the formation, then transferred almost all the oracles into the ship, and laid out a ferocious and bloody myriad ghost psychic formation. All he needed to do was wait for someone to rush out from this direction, and then he would kill them all. Wu Qi laughed heartily as he boarded the flying ship with his soldiers and rushed into the formation from the southeast corner at the fastest speed. As soon as they entered the array, a group of about 300 itinerant cultivators appeared in front of them. The strongest of these itinerant cultivators was only at the primordial soul realm, and the weakest had not even formed a gold core. They were just riding a flying sword and patrolling in the air. All of a sudden, they saw a large flying ship, shaped like a tortoise shell and with a large opening at the front, barging into the great array. Seeing that, all the cultivators there cried out loudly. That's right. At the same time, the formation was transforming countless green trees into thunderbolts and bombarding the trapped Great Yu army. While Wu Qi was mobilizing the army, more than 2,000 soldiers were killed by the greenwood thunderbolts. The whole formation was rumbling and roaring, and all the natural energy in the formation was sucked into a few hills to the east of the formation, then transformed into green energy by the formation and turned into thunderbolts to attack the enemy. Regardless of the situation, Wu Qi ordered the flying ship to move forward at the fastest speed. The deck of the ship was moved aside, revealing a large number of lookout openings that could allow people to poke half their bodies out. As Wu Qi gave the order, the soldiers waved their arms and threw out 1,500 fire thunderbolts with all their strength. The direction in which they were thrown was exactly where the green trees were located in the east of the formation. Deafening booms rang out as a great plume of flame soared into the sky. The black-red earth core poisonous flame rose hundreds of feet high, and the powerful fire thunderbolts blew up an area of 1,000 miles in circumference. The poisonous flame kept melting the rocks, and the magma tumbled and flowed across the ground, making it look like hell. More than half of the greenwood spiritual chi in the formation was set ablaze by the poisonous fire. The azure wood divine thunder that had just formed exploded in mid-air before it even fell. The immortals who were controlling the azure wood divine thunder were caught off guard and were badly battered by the explosion. Some unlucky ones had their bodies blown to pieces and even their immortal souls shattered. The formation of 5 elements was said to be infinitely mysterious, but in fact, it could be broken with the simplest way of promoting and restraining the 5 elements. Wu Qi saw the changes in the formation, so he rushed in from the weakest point of the formation and bombarded it with fire thunderbolts, immediately stopping the formation. Then, dozens of bone talismans were activated at the same time. Hundreds of fire dragons soared into the sky and rushed toward the mountains in the east. Amidst the dragon roars, the few mountains that were filled with chaotic energies suddenly collapsed. Flames hundreds of miles high rose from the ground, and lava and other things rose high into the sky. The terrifying power of the flames burned half of the sky red. If a grandmaster who was proficient in formations could reverse the formation and transfer the water power from the north to the east, the fire could still be extinguished and the formation could continue to operate. But the people who controlled the formation only had an ordinary mastery of formations, so they were thrown into confusion and failed to adjust the formation. Outside the formation, the 9 huge fireballs in the sky laughed wildly when they saw the red light shooting out from the east of the formation. The 9 fireballs fell whistling down, and the heavenly fire and earthly fire intertwined, burning the eastern foundation of the formation until there was no hope of saving it. Wu Qi let out a wild laugh. Controlling the jade armor dark turtle flying ship and controlling the several hundred fire dragons that shot out from the bone talismans, he went straight towards the door of gold element in the west while withstanding the wild bombardment from several hundred cultivators. Using the earthly fire to restrain the metal gate in the west immediately collapsed. Chapter 676. Burning the eastern azure wood with a raging fire would instantly disrupt the flow of spiritual qi in the entire formation. Then, the raging flames from the burning of the eastern azure wood would be directed to the western gung metal, burning the formation foundation of the western gung metal into ashes. With the destruction of the eastern and western formation bases, the energy in the formation was immediately thrown into a mess. The energy in the north and south of the formation bases froze in an instant, like the glaciers in the Northern Ocean. The formation was still constantly extracting energy from the surrounding 10,000 miles for its own use, but it could no longer be vented and turned into bolts of lightning to attack the enemy. The natural powers of the water gate and the fire gate in the north and the fire gate in the south were crazily compressed and frozen. Gradually, a dark cloud of frost appeared in the north, shrouding the mountains within thousands of miles like an iron curtain. In the south, a glowing red cloud of fire emerged. The color of the cloud of fire grew darker and darker, like a piece of white glass with blood dripping into it, quickly turning crimson. Both of these two masses of energy were thousands of miles wide, constantly thickening and compressing, gradually turning into two terrible energy storms. If anyone dared to rush into these two masses of energy, they could detonate them with just a little bit of magic power and blow the immortals hiding in them to pieces. Even gold immortals would not dare to take risks in a mass of energy thousands of miles in circumference. Now, the eastern side of the formation was burning like a pit of fire. Green wood and earth fire, as well as dozens of volcanoes that kept shooting up into the sky, were so hot that they could melt gold and iron. Even the clouds in the sky were burned to nothingness, making it difficult for both immortals and mortals to pass through. In the west, the white energy of metal element was quickly dissipating, along with the fire unleashed by Wu Qi. Wu Qi carefully controlled the intensity of the fire, turning the mountains in the west into a thoroughfare that mortals could pass through. Outside the formation, tens of thousands of great Yu army arrived with a sonorous sound of a dragon horn. Tens of thousands of soldiers boarded flying ships and swarmed into the formation, turning into a dark cloud that blotted out a large part of the sky. Arrows fell like raindrops, and bone talismans turned into tornadoes that swept across the sky. Powerful Zhong province generals, clad in golden armors and carrying heavy, custom-made weapons, unleashed gusts of wind around them, causing the immortals in the formation to stumble and flee in panic. The immortals controlling the formation on the mountain suffered a backlash from the chaotic energy, and dozens of the strongest immortals exploded and died on the spot. Their bodies exploded, blowing up all the palaces and mansions on the mountain, as well as the secret caves hidden in the mountain. The enormous mountain was broken in the middle, and a 10 miles tall mountaintop slowly rolled down to the ground. The deafening boom broke people's eardrums and made them bleed from their ears. The ground was shaking violently, and clouds of dust and smoke rose straight into the sky. Trapped in the formation, the despairing soldiers of Great Yu cheered together. Somehow, they mustered up the strength to kill the immortals and itinerant cultivators who were besieging them. The last batch of arrows were shot out, the last few bone talismans were thrown out, and the remaining oracles poured out their last bit of power, transforming into a vast ocean of flame and thunderbolts, burning thousands of cultivators with low cultivation bases to death. Wu Qi ordered the soldiers to fly the jade armor dark turtle flying ship over the heads of the trapped soldiers, and helped them board the ship. Of the 30,000 strong army, only slightly more than 10,000 were left unscathed. 4,000 to 5,000 were killed, and another 7,000 to 8,000 were seriously injured. All the wounded and dead were sent to the ship as quickly as possible. After that, Wu Qi directed the ship to charge at the disorderly immortals and itinerant cultivators on the mountain. The ship was stored with a large amount of ordnance. The soldiers who boarded the ship did not have time to wipe their sweat or take a breather. Instead, they carried large bundles of specially made arrows and rushed to the holes on both sides of the ship, shooting wildly at the immortals and itinerant cultivators who were flying around in the sky. The panting oracles, who had exhausted all their magic power, took the potions from the logisticians to quickly replenish their magic power and gulped them down. Then, they grabbed a large number of lethal bone talismans and all kinds of powerful one-time-use magic items, and angrily climbed to the upper deck of the ship. Then, they attacked the immortals and loose immortals outside the windows that had been specially opened. Thousands of immortals and itinerant cultivators surrounded Wu Qi's ship and unleashed countless spells like a storm. But the ship was very slow, and was one of the slowest flying ships of De Yu's army, but its defense was amazing. When the spells hit the ship's outer shell, they only created a lot of sparks and didn't even leave a mark on it. Some of the immortals' flying swords were of slightly inferior quality. When a sword beam landed on the ship was fine, but the flying swords were bounced back and broken into several pieces. Quite a few immortals suffered in this way. Their swords, which they had cultivated with their lives, were broken by the flying boat, and they coughed up blood and nearly fell from the clouds. What made them even more panicked was that not only was the formation destroyed, but the energy inside it had also become chaotic. The metal element energy had completely disappeared, the wood element energy was constantly transforming into a flaming storm, and the water element energy in the north and the fire element energy in the south had condensed into a terrible energy bomb. No one could absorb any energy from it. Only the earth element energy in the center was still calm, as the broken formation was still constantly extracting the earth element energy from the ground and dispersing it into the void. However, earth element energy was mostly used to deploy all kinds of defensive spells, and the most common attacks used by ordinary immortals were flames, flying daggers, xian bing, and a few others. Now that the metal element, fire element, and water element energy could not be used, the overall strength of immortals and itinerant cultivators was reduced by half. In just a quarter of an hour, Wu Qi's ship had approached the broken mountain by tens of miles. A deck at the belly of the ship was moved away, revealing 3 polygonal crystal pillars arranged in a triangular formation. Countless runes could be vaguely seen in the crystal pillars, and wisps of lightning kept shooting out of them. Behind the pillars was a huge crystal body, where a large group of oracles were filling boxes and boxes of energy stones and immortal stones into a blazing cauldron. This was the only large-scale weapon of war equipped with the jade armor Dark Turtle flying ship. It was made by the oracles of the Directorate of Celestials who specialized in thunder magic and the skilled craftsmen of the military court, and was called the Thunder Slaughtering Slaughter. The principle of this weapon was very simple. After gathering a large amount of energy, it would be transformed by the formation into a powerful thunderbolt, just like how immortals unleashed all kinds of immortal thunders. However, when immortals unleashed thunder magic, they still had to consider the backlash of immortal energy and other complicated issues. But the Thunder Slaughtering Slaughter did not have such concerns. All the materials used to make this weapon were the strongest that could be found on Pangu continent, and it even contained a hint of innate energy. When it was filled with enough immortal stones and energy stones, its power was strong enough to kill a top-tier gold immortal who was protected by an immortal artifact. Every time this powerful weapon was unleashed, a brilliant talisman master had to inscribe a new energy-gathering formation on it. In other words, the jade-shelled mystic turtle flying ship could only launch one attack in a battle. However, if this attack hit its target, the damage it would cause would be extremely shocking. The whole flying ship was enveloped in a strong light. A purple-blue thunderbolt about 5 miles in diameter rushed out from the bottom of the ship's belly, then quickly expanded to 100 miles in circumference. Accompanied by a deep rumble of thunder, the flying ship suddenly shot tens of miles into the sky, and in the next moment, a thunderbolt with a diameter of 100 miles whistled through the air toward the collapsed mountain in front of it. Along the way, countless immortals and cultivators who stood in its way were silently turned into nothingness by the thunderbolt. Several gold immortals, who were exhausted from the battle with the generals of Zhong province, wailed as they stared at the incoming thunderbolt. They did not even have the strength to activate their defensive gold immortal artifacts, and could only struggle a little in the thunderbolt before they were completely turned into wisps of smoke. The thunderbolt pierced through the middle of the mountain, pierced through the mountain for thousands of miles in circumference, and sank into the ground at an oblique angle. The last bit of the foundation of the fog formation was finally shattered, and thousands of heaven immortals and itinerant cultivators on the mountain were turned into ashes by the strike. Even those gold immortals with the highest cultivation base were affected by the thunderbolt and suffered serious injuries. Accompanied by a shrill whistle, the gold immortals summoned the remaining heaven immortals and cultivators nearby and prepared to flee in a direction. They could not escape from the west, for the flying ship was blocking their way. Behind it, tens of thousands of Dayu soldiers were charging from the west, killing heads and splattering blood all over the sky. They could not escape from the north or the south, for the water element energy and fire element energy were gathering crazily. They were 2 huge energy bombs, and once touched, they could explode and drag everyone into it. The only way out was to the east. However, the wood elemental energy in the east was being madly burned by the Great Fire, and dozens of huge volcanoes were erupting. Lava rose hundreds of miles into the air, and poisonous flames and black smoke were spewing all over the sky, distorting the void in that part of the world. High up in the sky, 9 huge fireballs kept shooting out countless fire arrows, turning that part of the void into a world of fire. That was the only way out. There was no other way out. One of the strongest gold immortals threw his head back and let out a long roar, then led a group of despondent immortals and itinerant cultivators toward the east. The gold immortal leaped into a beam of purple light and carried a few of his close friends as he fled toward the east. Then, he turned back and roared at Wu Qi's flying ship, "You are lucky to have broken my formation today. I will definitely repay you handsomely in the future." Wu Qi smiled and shook his head as he looked at the thousands of immortals who were fleeing in panic. Lucky to have broken the formation? TSK, how could this be luck? It was clearly because the formation you laid out was too simple. If it was a little more complicated, instead of simply using the elemental energies of the 5 elements, you could have added the transformations of the stars and the evils of the earth into it, and I wouldn't have been able to break it so easily. Hehe, you are indeed fleeing from the east, from the Greenwood Gate. Wu Qi whistled softly and closed his eyes, unable to bear the sight. Raging flames rose into the sky, filling the sky with raging flames. The immortals who fled from the Greenwood Gate were reduced to ashes in the sea of fire, howling and wailing. Apart from those gold immortals and their close disciples who were protected by them, all the other immortals and cultivators of Myriad Immortal Alliance had disappeared without a trace in the infernal inferno, howling miserably. With great difficulty, the group of over 100 gold immortals led 300 to 400 of their disciples and friends out of the sea of fire that stretched for thousands of miles, only to be greeted by a jade-armored dark turtle flying ship. A shrill ghost howl rose into the sky, and those gold immortals, who had exhausted their magic power, howled in despair. At least 70% of the gold immortals burst into a strong purple light at the same time. They had burned their immortal souls. Chapter 677. Burning the immortal's soul was a desperate ultimate move used by immortals. After burning the immortal soul, even if one managed to kill the enemy and escape, all his cultivation base would be gone, and he could only reincarnate with his true spirit. However, once he burned his immortal soul, he would be able to unleash a terrifying power that was 10 times stronger than his own strength for a short period of time. Although it could only last for a quarter of an hour, that quarter of an hour was enough for an immortal to destroy many things. When Wu Qi finally calmed the chaotic energy in the formation, neutralized the 2 energy bombs in the north and south, and steered the ship through the gradually calming volcanic zone, the battle between Bo Yunting and the 100 fleeing gold immortals was over. The 100 gold immortals were all killed, as were the immortals they brought with them. But, the 3 layers of armor around Bo Yunting's ship was also blown to pieces, and hundreds of oracles were killed or wounded. Fortunately, the ship itself was not damaged. As long as it was sent to the workshop under the military court in Liangzhou and re-equipped with the 3 layers of armor, it would still be intact. Although hundreds of oracles had been killed or wounded, Bo Yunting was still in high spirits. Over 100 gold immortals, thousands of heaven immortals, and tens of thousands of itinerant cultivators were killed in this battle. Their side had only lost a few thousand soldiers and hundreds of oracles. It was a very dazzling achievement. Not to mention Zhong province, even the other provinces did not have such a result. More than 100 gold immortals had been wiped out in one fell swoop. A gold immortal was not a lump of soil growing in the ground, not someone who could be cultivated quickly like great use generals. Every gold immortal was a lucky man who had gone through a long period of time that could be counted in eons. They had great perseverance, great luck, great fortune, and consumed incalculable resources to accumulate their strength bit by bit. Gold immortals were the backbone of the group of immortals, and the most important part of the immortal cultivation system. Out of 1,000 people, 300 could attain the Jin Dan. Out of 1,000 Jin Dan, about 100 could attain the nascent soul. Out of 1,000 nascent soul, about a dozen could attain the nascent divinity. Out of 1,000 nascent divinity, about 10 could attain the heaven immortal fruit. However, out of 10,000 celestial immortals, roughly 1 would become a golden immortal. In the entire outer heavenly realms, the ratio of gold immortals to heaven immortals was 1 to 100,000. How many celestial immortals were there? In the vast system of immortals, heaven immortals were the most ordinary commoners. And golden immortals were high and mighty nobles. Even if there were 10,000 peak stage heaven immortals, not even one of them would be able to become a golden immortal. Killing more than 100 golden immortals in a single battle, this result could only be described as glorious. According to the top-secret intelligence obtained by DU, the Myriad Immortal Alliance was an extremely large organization. However, the total number of known gold immortals in the Myriad Immortal Alliance was only about 800, which was known as the 800 Hidden Immortals of the Hidden Immortal Hall. Now, more than 100 golden immortals had been killed, and 1/6 of the strength of the union of 10,000 immortals had been completely destroyed. Given the overall strength of Dayu, if they were to confront each other head-on, any of Dayu's first-grade provinces could easily cripple the Myriad Immortal Alliance with a thunderous force. But, the upper-grade immortals of the Alliance rarely confronted Dayu's regular army head-on. So, it was really surprising that the Alliance had gathered more than 100 gold immortals and laid out a formation to ambush Bo Yunting's army. Fortunately, Wu Qi was there. He easily broke the formation laid out by the gold immortals and used the power of the formation to consume their energy. Then, Bo Yunting waited patiently outside, laid out a vicious restrictive spell in advance, and wiped out more than 100 gold immortals in one fell swoop. The report of the battle was sent back to Zhongning City as fast as possible. When Bo Zhongfu received the report, he could not believe it, and sent out 18 groups of civil and military officials to verify the result of the battle. When the result of the battle was confirmed, the severed limbs of the gold immortals, their identity medallions, and other personal belongings were sent to Zhongning City. Then, Bo Zhongfu immediately sent the spoils of the battle to Liangzhu with a formation. Ever since the war between Dayu and Myriad Immortal Alliance began, the immortals of the Alliance had been like underground rats, jumping out here and there to bite, and then jumping out there to scream. Panga continent was vast, and the immortals of Myriad Immortal Alliance could always find a weak spot in Dayu's army and give Dayu a hard blow. Over the years of war, Dayu's army had lost nearly 1 million soldiers, and the number of civilians killed was astronomical. The officials of Dayu did not even dare to report the number of casualties to the human emperor. Although Dayu's army was extremely powerful, in the face of an enemy that could not be found or touched, Dayu's army could only sweep around savagely. Countless mountain spirits and cultivation clans native to Panga continent had been wiped out, and countless itinerant immortals and cultivators who were besieged by the Great Yu army had been killed. But, the core forces of Myriad Immortal Alliance, the Gold Immortals of Hidden Immortal Hall and Divine Hall, who were even stronger than Gold Immortals, had rarely suffered a real blow. This time, Bo Yunting had killed more than 100 gold immortals, more than 1,000 heaven immortals, and tens of thousands of itinerant cultivators at once. Those heaven immortals and itinerant cultivators could only be regarded as supplementary, but the contribution of more than 100 gold immortals was too great. Bo Zhongfu hurriedly asked for the credit for his son. With the power of Bo clan in Liangzhu, perhaps Bo Yunting could be made a marquis because of this contribution. 9 official documents were sent from Zhongning City in a row. Bo Zhongfu had issued a strict order for Bo Yunting to return to Zhongning City with the army. The army of 10,000 soldiers Wu Qi brought with him did not belong to Zhongning City. But, as Bo Zhongfu had asked all those who had rendered meritorious service in the war to go to Zhongning City to wait for the reward, Wu Qi was glad to bring the army to Zhongning City. It was good to be rewarded, and Wu Qi could take the opportunity to go to Zhongning City to personally command the revenge against Yu Miao. Although the assassins, controlled by Luo Kadi, had caused a great disturbance in Yu clan's people, it was not as satisfying as seeing the flesh and blood of Yu Miao's people being smashed to pieces just by listening to Luo Kadi's report. Following closely behind Bo Zhongfu's tent, Wu Qi and the other captains brought their soldiers, lined up their flying ships neatly into a marching formation, and set off for Zhongning City in a mighty formation. What surprised Wu Qi and the others was that Bo Zhongfu, the prefecture overseer of Zhong province, had brought all the officials of Zhong province 100 miles out of the city to welcome Bo Yunting's army. On top of that, Bo Zhongfu had brought all the ceremonial guards of a first-grade prefecture overseer, a huge floating cloud platform, a magnificent hall, a ceremonial gate, and a 30,000-strong guard of honor, all clad in bright armor and looking awe-inspiring. In addition to Bo Zhongfu's own guards of honor, the officials from the military court, Directorate of Celestials, Punishment Court, and many others who came with him to welcome the guests had also brought a different number of guards according to their ranks, each of them carrying different guards of honor. It was such a grand scene that even Bo Yunting, who knew he had made a great contribution and would be rewarded with great benefits, shivered with fear. The scale of the welcoming ceremony was too outrageous. After a warm welcoming ceremony, Bo Zhongfu rewarded the soldiers of Zhong province and the 10,000 soldiers that Wu Qi had brought with him with a huge amount of wealth, fine wine, beef, and mutton. In particular, the generals of Zhong province who had participated in the battle under Bo Yunting's lead were all promoted in military ranks. Bo Zhongfu generously rewarded them with millions of acres of the most fertile land near Zhongning city, as well as the people in the villages and towns on it. The only strange thing was that Wu Qi did not receive any reward during the welcoming ceremony. Bo Zhongfu seemed to have forgotten that it was Wu Qi's efforts that had broken the formation. Wu Qi was full of doubts, but he noticed that Bo Zhongfu kept nodding and smiling at him, showing his goodwill. Therefore, Wu Qi hid among the generals without saying a word, waiting to see what Bo Zhongfu's intention was. At the welcoming ceremony, Left Minister Yu Miao naturally came out with the crowd. Obviously, the recent assassination of the juniors of Yu clan had given Yu Miao a headache. There were 2 eye-catching bags under his eyes, and his eye sockets were dark. Obviously, he had consumed a lot of energy recently. When he saw Wu Qi, the resentment in his eyes could poison 10,000 bulls to death. If this were not the place where Bo Yunting was coming back in triumph, Wu Qi had no doubt that Yu Miao would personally kill him again. Smiling at Yu Miao, who was full of resentment, Wu Qi shrugged and followed Bo Zhongfu and Bo Yunting into Zhongning city with the other generals. As soon as he settled down in the barracks and settled the 10,000 soldiers, one of Bo Zhongfu's confidants found Wu Qi and invited him to the Zhong province overseer mansion. In the side hall of the mansion, Wu Qi saw Bo Zhongfu, who was dressed in his usual robe and had a weary look on his face. Bo Yunting was not seen in the side hall. Apart from Wu Qi, Bo Zhongfu was the only person in the hall. After bowing to Bo Zhongfu, Wu Qi stood aside and quietly studied Bo Zhongfu, who was sitting cross-legged on a black jade hassock and emanating a faint cold aura. He had seen Bo Zhongfu from afar a few times, but this was the first time Wu Qi had seen him up close. This was a very graceful middle-aged man. Even the way each strand of hair on his head exuded a luxurious aura of someone born in an aristocratic family. Dignified, but not overbearing. Gentle, but not easily approachable. Gentle like jade, that jade-like color had a trace of a sharp aura, causing people to not dare to have the slightest bit of disrespect towards him. A nobleman from the Deyu clan with an almost perfect bearing was indeed worthy of being the human emperor's most trusted confidant. Wu Qi bowed his head and began to ponder why Bo Zhongfu had asked him to come here. Bo Zhongfu was also studying Wu Qi, but he didn't pay too much attention to Wu Qi. He just glanced at Wu Qi with an appreciative gaze of a superior and said directly, "General Tan Lang has made the greatest contribution in wiping out the 143 gold immortals of Myriad Immortal Alliance this time." Wu Qi cupped his fist and bowed, then said humbly with a smile, "It's Marshal Bo who commanded us well, and the soldiers who sacrificed their lives." Bo Zhongfu nodded and praised, not arrogant after taking credit, "Very good." After pondering for a moment, Bo Zhongfu stroked his beard and said, "You have made a great contribution, and logically speaking, you should be rewarded handsomely when you are presented to the human emperor. However, Yunting needs the title of a marquis. If all the credit is given to him, he will surely be conferred the title of a marquis." Bo Zhongfu raised his eyelids slightly, then looked at Wu Qi and said, "Give the greatest contribution to Yunting. According to your background and current official position, the human emperor can only give you land, beauties, and money. You have no hope of getting a title of nobility. I can give you these things even in Zhong province." Wu Qi understood what Bo Zhongfu meant. He smiled and cupped his fist and said, "Everything will be decided by Your Excellency Prefecture Overseer." "Well, if Your Excellency gives me land, can you give me another piece of land near my current East Sea County? Money is necessary, but as for beauties, can you exchange them for people?" Seeing that Wu Qi was so tactful, Bo Zhongfu smiled gladly. Bo Zhongfu was about to agree to Wu Qi's request when he heard footsteps coming from outside. A group of people went straight into the side hall where Bo Zhongfu was meeting guests. Bo Zhongfu couldn't help but feel annoyed. Who dared to break in when he was meeting guests? But as soon as he saw the people who came in, he hurriedly laughed and stood up to greet them. Chapter 678. Let them do whatever they want. By following King Yang Qiu, they would have more opportunities to render meritorious service and get more benefits, wouldn't they? Especially for someone like King Yang Qiu, he would be more generous, wouldn't he? But, these 30 generals with the symbol of Rain Master were at least as strong as 18th-tier gold immortals. Wu Qi did not say a word. One of them was the prefecture overseer of Zhong province, and the other was King Yang Qiu. He was just a general from the military court of a small 9th-grade province, and the county governor of a newly established East Sea county with a population of less than 1 million. He was not qualified to bargain with them. Fortunately, the foundation of the formation was not stable, and the Great Yu army had come to destroy the land within 10 miles of it with violence, forcibly breaking it open and rescuing King Yang Qiu. If King Yang Qiu had been trapped in the formation for a few more hours, his life would have been in danger. King Yang Qiu snorted softly as he took out a scroll and spread it on the ground. A hazy halo burst out of the scroll, revealing a large number of mountains and rivers. Pointing at the mountains and rivers, he told them about how King Yang Qiu had been on expeditions in recent months with his army, but had run into a wall in the hands of the immortals of Myriad Immortal Alliance. With a subtle smile, Wu Qi turned to look at Bo Zhongfu. These warriors were all wearing black cloaks, embroidered with a rugged mountain in the middle with 2 small characters, Yang Qiu, the size of mung beans, in the middle. The cloaks were made of human hair, and the edges were wrapped with human tendons as thin as a hammer. It was also an extremely powerful defensive magical artifact, and had a strong resistance to all kinds of soul magic used by immortals. Bo Zhongfu sat down on another hassock, leaned his body toward King Yang Qiu with a smile, and asked, "Your Excellency, what brings you here today?" Wu Qi almost burst out laughing when he saw King Yang Qiu. Perhaps he was frightened by the fact that Wu Qi had kidnapped King Yang Qiu from Yugu's supreme tower, right under the nose of a mighty supreme oracle, so King Yang Qiu was accompanied by dozens of extremely powerful warriors and oracles. Bo Zhongfu understood the meaning behind Wu Qi's smile. After pondering for a moment, he told King Yang Qiu about the agreement he had just reached with Wu Qi. If he wanted Wu Qi to give all the credit to Dog Count Yunting, Bo Zhongfu would have to give Wu Qi a lot of land, money, and people. As King Yang Qiu talked about his bad luck over the past few months, Bo Zhongfu blinked his eyes and kept glancing at Wu Qi with a flicker in his eyes. For a moment, Wu Qi felt that Bo Zhongfu was like a pervert in heat, and he was a peerless beauty who was trying to say something to him with his amorous eyes. This territory included Hai Province, as well as a large area of the neighboring Lin Province and Fang Province. In this way, the East Sea County, which spanned 3 provinces, had actually become Wu Qi's private fief. From today on, all the taxes, tributes, and the like in the East Sea County would be directly responsible to Zhong Province. Bo Zhongfu nodded with a smile and said, "Your Excellency is right. Since I, Du, have attacked Myriad Immortal Alliance, I should wipe them out completely." The strength of 9th-grade lieutenants, 6th-grade colonels, and 3rd-grade generals might vary, but only those who had reached the level of 2nd Pengu Heaven and were strong enough to fight against gold immortals were qualified to be conferred the title of generals by divine beasts. The problem was, Bo Zhongfu was a man, so it was difficult for Wu Qi to understand the meaning behind the gleam in his eyes. Bo Zhongfu rarely winked at people, and he rarely communicated with them in this way. So, even though his eyelids were sore, Wu Qi still looked at him in confusion. Then, 3 months ago, one of King Yang Qiu's capable generals led an army of 30,000 to attack an itinerant cultivator clan, but accidentally stumbled into a heavenly thunder and earthly flame formation. The army was burned to ashes, and the general's internal organs were invaded by fire poison. King Yang Qiu had already sent him back to Liangzhu to recuperate. But, the fire poison had invaded his body, and even if he was treated well, the general's cultivation base had dropped by about 30%. It was a heavy loss. After telling him what had happened in the past few months, King Yang Qiu said coolly, "Clearly, Myriad Immortal Alliance's strength has been wiped out by Yu's thunderous attack. They are no longer able to confront us head-on, and now they can only defend their strongholds and fight against our Great Yu army with formations." King Yangqiu glanced at Bo Zhongfu and twitched the corner of his mouth into a smile. You're right, but our biggest problem now is the various formations deployed by those immortals. I heard that General Tan Lang has just broken one of them, and Bo Yunting has made a great contribution. His face a little pale, King Yangqiu slowly nodded to Bo Zhongfu, who had come up to greet him warmly, then sat down on the black jade hassock where Bo Zhongfu had been sitting just now. Bo Zhongfu smiled and clapped his hands. A few maids came in silently and carefully placed a few hassocks on the floor in front of King Yangqiu. 9 months ago, King Yangqiu had led an army of 300,000 soldiers to attack a cave abode built at the bottom of an abyss by cultivators of Myriad Immortal Alliance, but they were defeated by a formation that looked like a windmill and could shoot out billions of wind blades when it was activated. 7 months ago, King Yangqiu had led his personal guards to hunt down a family of itinerant cultivators. Just as he was about to kill all 300 of them, 2 masters of formation from Myriad Immortal Alliance deployed a formation using the nearby mountains and rivers, which nearly trapped him inside. In addition to these 30 soldiers, who were extremely well-equipped and had extremely powerful cultivation bases, King Yangqiu was accompanied by 10 oracles in black linen robes with the pattern of suns embroidered on their sleeves. The weakest of them had 3 round suns embroidered on his sleeves, while the strongest had 8 suns embroidered on his sleeves. In Diyu, the personal guards of princes like King Yangqiu had great privileges, and Wu Qi had already figured out how to use them to give Yu Mu a surprise. In the complicated military system of Diyu, the ranks above Wu Qi's lieutenant, colonel, and general were so complicated that even the senior ministers of Diyu could not distinguish them clearly. There were all kinds of powerful generals with divine beasts as their titles. The generals with the title of divine beast were divided into several levels according to the strength of the divine beast. A general at the level of Rain Master should be in existence of the lowest level among all the divine beast generals. Satisfied, Wu Qi bowed respectfully to King Yangqiu and immediately became one of King Yangqiu's ordinary personal guards. Wu Qi glanced at the waists of these soldiers, and his pupils constricted. Each of the 30 soldiers had 2 jade medallions hanging from their lion belts. One was the size of a child's palm, carved with patterns of mountains, rivers, and clouds, and in the middle of it were the words Yangqiu. The other was a little bigger, with a strange creature shaped like a sheep with a pair of wings on its back flying in the wind amidst the clouds that were intertwined with 9 spirit snakes. In their wide-open mouths were 2 rows of sharp teeth made of bone thorns refined with a mystic technique, which could be shot out as soon as they were activated. It would be a fatal mistake to ignore the bone thorns, which numbered more than 100 in total. Wu Qi bowed to King Yangqiu, then sat down cross-legged on a hassock with his back straight. With his hands on his knees, he naturally exuded an air of majesty. King Yangqiu looked Wu Qi up and down for a while, then nodded with satisfaction. The man who broke into the side hall of the mansion with a large group of guards was King Yangqiu, who was clad in a black cloak with only his face exposed. In addition to the land, Bo Zhongfu would also give Wu Qi enough money to build 100 new cities, and transfer tens of millions of people from the nearby provinces to Wu Qi's rule. The winged sheep was a legendary divine creature known as the Lord of Rain, a powerful creature who could summon clouds and rain, and had the power to control the weather. The shoulders, elbows, chest, knees, and other parts of the armor were all carved with ferocious and twisted ghost heads with exquisite craftsmanship. These ghost heads were not only ornaments, but they also had a direct lethal power. A thumb-sized black pearl was embedded in the pupils of each ghost head, within which a wisp of green flame could be seen faintly. These pearls were actually Yin thunders with astonishing destructive power, which could be shot out at any time to injure the enemy. King Yangqiu snorted coldly and said in a deep voice, "I don't care why they are defending so desperately. Maybe they have reinforcements, or maybe they have other tricks up their sleeves. But we have to wipe them out as soon as possible." King Yangqiu looked at Wu Qi, who was standing in the middle of the side hall, then reached out a finger and pointed at a hassock in front of him. "Military Minister of High Province, Tan Lang. Have a seat." Without waiting for Bo Zhongfu to explain, King Yangqiu said in a deep voice, "The title of Marquis of Diyu is divided into 9 grades. According to Bo Yunting's contribution, he can only be conferred the title of Marquis of the 9th grade at most. How much effort have I saved him by promoting him to the rank of Marquis of the 3rd grade? Just let Tan Lang accompany me in the battle. The aura emanating from the 30 soldiers was as sharp as freshly unsheathed sabers. Wu Qi only took a few glances at them, but he felt as if he had been slashed in the face. The 10 oracles, on the other hand, did not give off any sense of existence. They gave off the feeling of 10 ghosts drifting into the hall after King Yang Qiu, and then separated themselves to the left and right, taking control of the entire hall in a very natural manner. 10 days ago, when King Yang Qiu was leading his army to attack an immortal market run by Myriad Immortal Alliance, he sneaked out of the camp in the middle of the night with a few guards. As a result, he strayed into a formation laid out by an immortal, and was struck on the back by a series of swords condensed from 360 stars. One of his defensive armors was smashed to pieces, and he nearly lost his life. King Yang Qiu raised his eyebrows and nodded disapprovingly. Then, he pointed his finger at the scroll on the ground, and a bright light poured out of it, revealing all the mountains and rivers in the vicinity of East Sea County. After a brief discussion, King Yang Qiu drew a circle in the vicinity of East Sea County. Immediately, a land 10 times the size of the current East Sea County was drawn out and turned into the new territory of East Sea County. 30 warriors clad in black heavy armor. Every set of heavy armor was of the same standard. The pitch-black battle armor covered their entire bodies, and their helmets, which were shaped like copper bells, had 2 long curved horns. The front of the helmets was covered by a pitch-black demon mask, which made them look extremely ferocious. The armors were half an inch thick, and their surface was inlaid with a layer of dense black dragon scales, which were inscribed with complex 3-dimensional runes, giving them a above-average defense. Chapter 679. King Yang Qiu's personal guards were divided into 2 types. One of them was the personal bodyguards who were responsible for his safety. These bodyguards were basically warriors whose brains were stuffed with muscles, or priests whose brains were replaced by the magic of ghosts and gods. They did not have any skills other than killing and arson, or acting as human shields when necessary. The second type was the various strange talents that King Yang Qiu had painstakingly gathered, such as those who specialized in managing his taxes and revenues, training his hounds and falcons, and training his personal guards, as well as people like Wu Qi, who could give him advice in government and military affairs. Bo Zhongfu eagerly escorted King Yang Qiu and his company to the gate with all the officials of the prefecture overseer's mansion. When King Yang Qiu boarded the chariot, Bo Zhongfu held Wu Qi's hand and said some warm words to him, trying to build a closer relationship with Wu Qi. He lowered his voice and told Wu Qi that as long as Wu Qi needed his help in East Sea County, just let him know. Wu Qi accepted Bo Zhongfu's kindness without hesitation. His identity was different now. As King Yang Qiu's personal guard, he was in fact King Yang Qiu's retainer. His subordinate was no longer in Zhong province, but directly under King Yang Qiu. Although Bo Zhongfu was the prefecture overseer of Zhong province and a close confidant of the current human emperor, King Yang Qiu was a member of the imperial clan, the King of Diyu. In terms of bloodline and tradition, Bo Zhongfu could not compare with King Yang Qiu at all. Now that he had become King Yang Qiu's personal guard, and a personal guard who specialized in military affairs, with King Yang Qiu's status, as long as Wu Qi made a little contribution in the future, it would be a piece of cake for him to be promoted. If Bo Zhongfu could build a good relationship with Wu Qi now, it would be extremely convenient for Bo Zhongfu and his clan in the future. It was just a few warm words, so there was nothing to be embarrassed about. After sending King Yang Qiu to the chariot, Bo Zhongfu stood at the gate and watched as King Yang Qiu and his company stepped into the teleportation formation and disappeared in a beam of bright light. King Yang Qiu and his bodyguards returned to his barracks through the teleportation formation, but Wu Qi stayed in Zhongning City. He would lead his army to meet King Yang Qiu's army at dawn. Although King Yang Qiu came and went quickly, Wu Qi's identity medallion, military medallion, official documents, and even the uniforms of King Yang Qiu's personal guards were all distributed to him in the prefecture overseer's mansion. From these details, it could be seen that King Yang Qiu was full of confidence in his every move. He was confident that Wu Qi would not refuse his invitation, and he was confident that Bo Zhongfu would not give Wu Qi to him. Therefore, he had prepared everything in advance. Even the identity medallion that was given to Wu Qi was engraved with the name, Tan Lang, all the official documents were properly prepared, and even the armor and cloak that were given to Wu Qi were a perfect fit. King Yang Qiu, who was extremely confident, tough and direct in his approach, lofty and even a little domineering. Standing at the end of the street and watching King Yang Qiu's chariot disappear in the bright light, Wu Qi could not help but smile. Working for King Yang Qiu was obviously much better than staying in Zhong province. If King Yang Qiu's personality was put to good use, it would be of great help to Wu Qi. With a faint smile, Wu Qi cupped his fist and bowed to Bo Zhongfu, who was standing at the entrance of the mansion. Then, he hurried out of the city with his guards, preparing to assemble the army and arrange the logistics, and then meet King Yang Qiu at the place where he was stationed. King Yang Qiu was now leading an army to wipe out the strongholds of Myriad Immortal Alliance in Minggu Province, a first-grade province near Zhong Province. It would take him half a month to travel from Zhong Province to Minggu Province at the fastest speed of a flying ship. Therefore, Wu Qi had to arrange the march and deployment of the army along the way. After a busy night, the army of 10,000 soldiers from East Sea Province, who had just set up camp in the military camp in Zhongning City, was ready to set off. With Bo Yunting's favor, the military court of Zhong Province had replenished Wu Qi's army of 10,000 with enough armaments for 50,000 soldiers, and even made an exception for Wu Qi with several powerful war machines, such as giant crossbows. Even the current clan master of the Yu clan in Zhong Province, Yu Mu, had received the news, and had sent hundreds of oracles to serve under Wu Qi. With the help of the hundreds of oracles, Wu Qi had no choice but to visit Yu Mu in person to express his gratitude. He knew that it was an investment from Yu Mu, but it was still a favor after all. The fact that Wu Qi could have hundreds of oracles accompanying his army of 10,000 soldiers was enough to make other military officers envious. When everything was ready, Wu Qi handed a map scroll to Huang Liang. The map scroll was also a small magical artifact, and it recorded the route from Zhong Province to Minggu Province to meet up with King Yang Qiu's army. With it, Huang Liang could lead the army to Minggu Province and join King Yang Qiu's army. After all, Wu Qi's army did not have any military affairs to attend to at the moment, and it was just a normal deployment. The cost of using teleportation formations to get to Minggu Province was too high, so it was better for them to travel by themselves. In particular, it was extremely costly to use teleportation formations to transport large flying ships and other things that came with the army. So, there was no need for Wu Qi's army of 10,000 soldiers to use too many resources. But Wu Qi was different. He was King Yang Qiu's personal guard, and he had been given one night to organize the army. He had to rush to King Yang Qiu's side as soon as possible and give him military affairs, which could not be delayed at all. Therefore, he had to use teleportation formations to get to King Yang Qiu's side. After explaining everything and watching the flying ships led by Huang Liang take off in the direction of Minggu Province, Wu Qi changed out of his armor and cloak, put on the unique uniform of King Yang Qiu's personal guard, and hurried into Zhongning City with more than 100 personal guards, heading for the square in front of the prefecture overseer mansion. Because of the series of wars, Zhong Province had entered a period of war preparation. The streets were empty, with few residents walking around, and more heavily armed patrols were patrolling the streets. The crisp sound of clappers could be heard coming from the watchtowers around the city. It was the signal for the sentries to change shifts and for the soldiers to have their breakfast. The wheels of a few convoys rattled as they made their way down the street. The vehicles were loaded with a large number of metal ingots and some glinting bones. These were the materials for the military court to forge ordnance and the raw materials for the Directorate of Celestials to craft bone talismans. The shops and restaurants along the streets were all open, but there were not many customers. Inside the empty houses, all the managers and waiters of the shops and restaurants were sitting on the long benches in a daze, staring blankly at Wu Qi and his company who were walking through the street at top speed like a pair of withered white geese. Wu Qi could not help but shake his head. If the war between De Yu and Myriad Immortal Alliance continued, so what if the alliance was wiped out? De Yu's loss was not worth the gain, and the losses and blows they had suffered could not be made up for in 3 to 5 years. To get to the square in front of the Zhong province overseer mansion, they had to pass through Yu Clan's mansion. But today, coincidentally, when Wu Qi and his company passed through the front gate, Yu Miao's son, Yu Lei, the man who had gone to East Sea County to seize Wu Qi's property, happened to come out of the gate with a group of guards. Yu Lei was taken aback when he saw Wu Qi walk past in a majestic black armor with a ghost's head. Suddenly, he spat on the ground. Pointing a finger at Wu Qi, he sneered and said, "Look, this is the wild dog that can't be tamed properly. He only got the position of the county governor of East Sea County because he clung to Yu Miao's thigh, and now he has climbed to a higher position. He, Tan Lang, you are the dog of Yu Clan." Wu Qi flew into a rage and stopped abruptly. Yu Lei stood at the front gate, pointing a finger at Wu Qi and laughing sarcastically. Gradually, Yu Lei's words became more and more unpleasant, and he even described Wu Qi as Yu Miao's boy toy, saying that he had tricked Yu Miao into giving him the territory of East Sea County by sleeping with Yu Miao. In the end, Yu Lei burst out laughing without caring about the consequences and said, "This boy has fawned on King Yang Qiu this time. I wonder how many times he has been fucked by someone, and how did he become King Yang Qiu's personal guard?" A personal guard. The group of guards who followed Yu Lei threw their heads back and roared with laughter, and Yu Lei laughed loudly as well. His solemn, square-shaped face became extremely twisted and ferocious at this moment. Many of Wu Qi's personal guards took a few steps forward at the same time, trying to distinguish themselves from Yu Lei. The personal guards around Wu Qi were all carefully selected burly men who were born and raised in East Sea County. These simple and honest men did not know any great principles, but since Wu Qi had educated them with kindness and given money to their families, these stubborn men only knew one thing: Wu Qi was their master. If they did not react when their master was insulted like this, how could they still be human? But, when Wu Qi scolded the guards, who were half unsheathed, they all took a few steps back reluctantly. With a smile on his face, Wu Qi walked up to Yu Lei, cupped his fist, and bowed gently to him. "Your Excellency Yu Lei, we don't have such a deep hatred, do we?" Yu Lei gave Wu Qi a sideways glance arrogantly, sneered, and said, "You know very well in your heart. Let's just wait and see. For someone like you who is like a pig or a dog, as long as my father is free, you will be turned into ashes sooner or later." Blood splashed in all directions, and the sound of bones breaking and flesh breaking shocked Yu Lei's personal guards. In front of so many servants and gatekeepers in front of Yu Clan's entrance, and so many personal guards, Wu Qi, who was still smiling a moment ago, suddenly rose and punched through Yu Lei's chest, digging out his violently beating heart. Wu Qi gave a strange laugh, tore open Yu Lei's jaw, shoved his heart into his mouth, and then smashed half of his head with his fist. A shrill ghost howl burst out from Wu Qi's palm, and a few wisps of dark smoke sprayed out, wrapping Yu Lei's soul tightly. Then, a wisp of green flame sprayed out. Yu Lei's soul let out a miserable howl, and in just a blink of an eye, it was burned into ashes. Murder on the street. Murder on the street in the center of Zhongning City. Murder on the street in front of the Yu Clan, the ruler of Zhong Province's Directorate of Celestials. The victim was Yu Lei, the biological son of Yu Miao, the great elder of Yu Clan. Silence reigned in the surroundings, as if even the wind between the heaven and earth had stopped moving. The only sound that could be heard was the blood dripping down from Wu Qi's fingertips, producing a soft dripping sound. A shrill howl soared into the sky from inside Yu Clan's mansion, as Yu Miao, shrouded in a towering ghost aura, rushed out. "Tan Lang, you little punk, pay with your life." Yu Miao's body flickered as he leaped several miles into the air, thrusting his palm down toward Wu Qi. Chapter 680. Leaping up into the air, Yu Kei exerted almost all the strength he had in his previous life, throwing a palm strike at Wu Qi with all his might. Although he did not have the time to borrow the power of the ghost deity, with the energy he had accumulated over the years of associating with the ghost deity, the palm strike was as strong as an 18th-tier gold immortal. Accompanied by a shrill ghost howl, a black palm several tens of feet in circumference plunged down from the sky. Vaguely, one could see the shadows of runes flashing in the palm. It was the ghost warding seal, which Yuzong had obtained from the ghosts and deities of the outer domain after a cruel blood sacrifice. The palm strike could turn a living person into a ghost, and the ghost-controlling seal could immediately imprison the soul of the killer, turning him into a ghost servant under Yu Miao's control. Yu Miao stared at Wu Qi with eyes full of fire. He was determined to imprison Wu Qi's soul in the boundless Yin flame and torture him day and night, immersing him in endless pain for all eternity. For some reason, when Yu Miao saw Wu Qi for the first time, he felt uncomfortable all over, and wished he could slap Wu Qi to death. In the end, Wu Qi had brought him great trouble. He could not believe that he had helped that good-for-nothing Yu Miao seize the power of High Province. In Yu Miao's mind, the power of High Province was supposed to be given to his beloved grandson, but in the end, it was Yu Miao. Not only that, during the fight for the power of High Province, Wu Qi had humiliated Yu Miao to such an extent. Yu Miao had failed to kill Wu Qi with 3 palm strikes in a row, which had become the joke of the whole Yu clan. After that, Yu Miao's disciple and son tried to retaliate against Wu Qi, but in the end, both of them were killed by Yu Huai's powerful counterattack. How could Yu Miao not feel heartache when he went for wool and came home shorn? Not only were his son and disciple killed, but the assassin he sent to assassinate Wu Qi, who was seriously wounded and bedridden, failed to kill him. Even when Wu Qi was brainwashed by the evil spirit Zither, the assassin failed to kill Wu Qi. Yu Lei, who was sent to take over the power of the East Sea County, returned to Zhongning City with a dejected face. Yu Lei had been humiliated, but the cruel revenge that followed had cost him a great number of his people. Dozens of his grandsons and granddaughters were killed, and the heartache almost made him faint. After that, the properties of many elders in his lineage were hit like a storm. Many shops were burned and looted, and the losses were so heavy that he almost went bankrupt. Even without the art of divination, Yu Miao knew that all this was related to Wu Qi, and he was definitely involved in it. Yu Miao thought that he was a successful man, and he had a good interpersonal relationship. Apart from Wu Qi, no one had such a grudge against him. Last night, when he heard that Wu Qi had been recruited by King Yang Qiu as his personal guard, and that Yu Miao had sent hundreds of oracles from the Directorate of Celestials to Wu Qi early in the morning, Yu Miao's resentment grew even stronger. After getting up early in the morning with a belly full of anger, Yu Miao was discussing with a few of his closest confidants how to retaliate against Wu Qi. Suddenly, his heart beat violently. His favorite son, Yu Lei, was killed right in front of Yu clan's gate. As father and son were connected by blood, Yu Miao's blood and energy swelled at that moment, and the sudden heartache nearly made him faint. Looking at Wu Qi, whose hand was still stained with the blood of his beloved son, Yu Miao roared furiously and threw a palm strike at Wu Qi with all his strength. I don't care whose personal guard you are, whether you are a promising young man whom Yu Miao has tried his best to bribe, whether you have just sold a great favor to Bo Zhongfu, I'll kill you. I must kill you. Hovering in midair, Yu Miao let out a strange laugh. After the palm strike, he immediately performed an incantation gesture with both hands and muttered an incantation under his breath, preparing to use the power of the ghost god to burn Wu Qi to ashes. Looking at the vicious palm strike coming down from above, Wu Qi laughed and said, "You have a quick reaction. After all, father and son are cultivating their minds." Wu Qi knew very well how powerful the oracles of the Directorate of Celestials were, and he also knew their limitations. When they borrowed the power of the ghost god, they were qualified to fight against the primordial immortals of the celestial court. But, when they did not borrow the power of the ghost god, their overall strength was nothing more than ordinary. When Yu Miao borrowed the power of the ghost god, his overall strength was close to that of a peak-level gold immortal. But now, the palm strike he threw out in a hurry was nothing more than the overall strength of an 18th tier gold immortal. A mere 18th tier gold immortal. Wu Qi's current cultivation base had crossed that threshold. Whether it was his fleshly body, magic power, or divine abilities, he was already half a step into the realm of gold immortals. And, that was not all. After being tempered by 300 guardian heavenly dragons in Ming Li's Buddhist kingdom, Wu Qi's fleshly body was now strong enough to fight against a body cultivator of the realm of gold immortal. His current fleshly body was truly as strong as a gold immortal's. He threw his head back and let out a long roar. Purple mist rose from his body, and a great plume of ghostly gray mist sprayed out of it. Wu Qi sprung up into the sky, opened his mouth, and swallowed the palm strike. The interstitial world vibrated violently, and a large amount of chaotic energy soared into the sky, wrapping the grayish palm print in the boundless chaotic energy, and gradually weakening it. This was the benefit of forming an interstitial world. Although Wu Qi could withstand the palm strike with his fleshly body, he was bound to be injured. But, by absorbing and digesting the palm strike with his interstitial world, Wu Qi had a much easier time fighting against the power of one man with the power of a small world. Amidst Yu Miao's horrified gaze, he swallowed Yu Miao's attack in one gulp. Suddenly, dozens of figures who looked exactly like Wu Qi appeared amidst the ghostly energy around Wu Qi. Some of them were laughing loudly, some were wailing madly, some were rolling on the ground, and some were hacking and slashing at each other with sharp blades in their hands. With that, Wu Qi's true form had blended into the mass of ghostly shadows, and no one could capture his figure anymore. In the mansion, at least 50 moon oracles produced powerful bone talismans at the same time. All kinds of attacks, such as thunderbolts, flames, blades, ice, and wind, soared into the sky and pounced at Wu Qi. The shadows and the ghostly energy were shattered, but no matter how many they destroyed, 2 or more shadows would appear for every shadow they destroyed, and they could not be completely wiped out. Wu Qi gave a sinister laugh as he unleashed a vast sheet of Shen energy to envelop the entire mansion. Countless shadows emerged one after another, preventing the oracles from attacking him accurately. Meanwhile, his true form rushed in front of Yu Miao and punched him in the face. Wu Qi had used all his strength in the punch, and Yu Miao, who was caught off guard, howled miserably and was knocked flying away. However, Yu Miao had a few defensive spirit items with him. As soon as Wu Qi's punch shattered his nose, a spirit talisman leaped onto his head and transformed into a hazy robe that wrapped him up. 90% of the force of Wu Qi's punch was instantly absorbed by the robe, and Yu Miao was not fatally wounded. This was the gap between the defensive magical treasures of Oracle de Yu and the immortal items of immortals. Although the defensive magical treasures of Oracle de Yu were as powerful as immortal items, there was always a delay when they were activated, especially those bone talismans that could automatically protect their owners. Therefore, Oracle de Yu had to prepare all the magical treasures in advance before fighting the immortals. Otherwise, he would be in danger of losing his life if he was careless. Yu Miao had come out in a hurry, and his mind was filled with thoughts of revenge for his son. How could he have the time to activate his magical treasures? With great difficulty, a bone talisman that automatically protected Yu Miao's face, preventing him from being disfigured by Wu Qi. But, Wu Qi's attacks came one after another. Punches, kicks, headbutt, elbows, and wisps of ghostly flames soared into the sky, transforming into ghostly claws that scratched and gnawed at Yu Miao. Amidst Wu Qi's deep and powerful incantation, all kinds of vicious curses and spells fell on Yu Miao like raindrops, putting him in a very difficult situation. For a moment, Yu Miao's eyes were bloodshot. Wu Qi's ghost eyes curse was trying to devour his eyes. For a moment, Yu Miao felt a sharp pain in his lower body. Wu Qi's yang breaking curse was corroding his yang. For a moment, Yu Miao's internal organs were numb and sore, and Wu Qi's internal rotting curse was corroding his internal organs. All kinds of vicious curses kept raining down. Fortunately, Yu Miao was, after all, an old oracle who had dabbled in all kinds of curses. Amidst Wu Qi's storm-like attacks, Yu Miao hastily blocked Wu Qi's punches and kicks. At the same time, he kept reciting incantations to ward off Wu Qi's curses. The few magical items he wore, such as jade pendants, jade bracelets, and jade rings, were glowing faintly, weakening Wu Qi's attacks. Seeing that Yu Miao was about to turn the tables with his experience, Wu Qi became anxious. "Come out, Lei Meng. I have something good for you," he cried out. A huge spatial rift that ordinary people could not perceive suddenly appeared over the Yu clan's mansion, and Lei Meng's projection descended at the fastest speed. Lei Meng's lips were moving rapidly, as if he was chewing something. At the same time, he kept burping. Obviously, he had not finished digesting the blood sacrifice on Myriad Immortals' planet. What is it? There is something good again. You are a quick and efficient boy, and I like it. Lei Meng burst into laughter as soon as he appeared. For a moment, Yu Miao's face was as pale as a sheet of paper, and he looked no different from a ghost. Looking at Lei Meng looming in the sky in horror, he screamed at the top of his lungs, "Gui Shao! Save me, Your Excellency Gui Shao! I'll definitely prepare a large amount of blood sacrifice for you." While Yu Miao was reciting incantations and howling, Wu Qi had already finished the exchange with Lei Meng as fast as he could, then pointed a finger at Yu Miao. Lei Meng sneered and slapped his palm down. Bolts of lightning coiled around the palm like countless furious dragons twisting and roaring. Seeing that Lei Meng was about to kill Yu Miao, who was screaming and screaming, finally persuaded Gui Shao, the ancestor god he worshipped, to save him by offering a large amount of blood sacrifice. A bony arm with ragged skin and flesh stretched out of the void next to Yu Miao and collided with Lei Meng's hand with brute force. A deafening boom rang out, and dozens of palaces in Yu Clan's mansion collapsed. Lei Meng gave a furious roar as he grabbed the giant hand and followed it into the spatial tunnel. Obviously, he had failed to kill Yu Miao, so he had gone straight to Gui Shao to kill him. Yu Miao, on the other hand, howled miserably. Although the two ghosts and deities did not kill him, all the magical items he carried, such as jade pendants, were shattered, and the huge shockwave severely wounded his frail body. A beam of black light shot out of Wu Qi's collar. Ao Buzan opened his mouth and bit down on Yu Miao's body, ripping off both of his legs with a loud crunch. Wu Qi gave a cold snort. Just as he was about to rush forward and kill Yu Miao, a beam of dark light suddenly approached him from the side. Yu Miao stopped in front of Wu Qi, looking at Wu Qi with a faint smile on his face as he nodded and said, "General Tan Lang, for my sake, please spare the Grand Elder of Yu Clan." Wu Qi was taken aback, and his clenched fist could no longer punch down. Chapter 681. Yu Miao fell heavily to the ground. Both of his legs were bitten off by Ao Buzan, but there was not even a drop of blood on the wound. Only a sticky, pale green liquid was slowly oozing out. This was the result of years of dealing with ghosts, deities, and other otherworldly beings. Yu Miao did not have much blood essence left in his body, and he relied entirely on this blood-like liquid, which was a mixture of ghost energy, magic power, and the aura of living beings to sustain his life. Had it not been for all kinds of rare spirit herbs, he would have exhausted his lifespan and returned to transmigration when the first wisp of this liquid, which was called ghost blood, appeared in his body. But, as the great elder of the Yu clan in Zhong province, he had access to a lot of resources, and he could constantly consume all kinds of rare natural treasures to prolong his lifespan. That was why he was able to live to this day. Hiding in Wu Qi's collar, Ao Buzan munched contentedly on both of Yu Miao's legs. As he had been taking a lot of spirit herbs to sustain his life, his body had accumulated a lot of undigested medicinal strength. After all, he was not an immortal, and there was still a lot of medicinal strength left in his body after the spirit herbs had prolonged his lifespan. The two legs Ao Buzan had bitten off contained an amazing medicinal strength. If digested, it would undoubtedly be equivalent to the medicinal strength of several gold immortal pills concocted by gold immortals, which would be of great benefit to Ao Buzan. In front of all the members of the Yu clan, Wu Qi stomped heavily on the seriously wounded Yu Miao's face. Wu Qi was clad in the ghost head heavy armor specially equipped by King Yang Qiu's personal guards, and his boots were a set of metal boots that were fused with the greaves. The heavy soles were forged with countless layers of flexible metal sheets, and the 1-inch thick metal soles had been refined with a mystic technique, making them as soft as the soles of ox tendons. But, their defensive strength was not to be underestimated. The soles of the heavy metal boots were densely covered with sharp teeth that looked like wolf fangs. When Wu Qi stomped on Yu Miao's face, the teeth sank deep into his cheek. Drops of ghost blood kept oozing out of his face, but he did not even make a sound. With a strange sneer on his face, Yu Mu fixed his eyes on Yu Miao, who was standing next to him, gasping for breath with his mouth open. Yumu glanced at Wu Qi with a strange smile that he could not explain, then cupped his fist and bowed solemnly to Wu Qi. General Tan Lang, it's my fault this time. Yu Lei's words just now were very disrespectful to King Yangqiu. General Tan Lang, please cover it up for us. When Yu Lei insulted and attacked Wu Qi just now, he had implicated King Yangqiu. It could be a big or a small matter, and it was easy to turn it into a small one. As long as no one told King Yangqiu about it, the world would be at peace, and no one would take it seriously. But, if someone told King Yangqiu about it, and someone like Wu Qi added fuel to the story, King Yangqiu would have to chop off thousands of heads to appease his anger for such a disrespectful act to the king of the imperial clan. By pointing out that it was Yu Lei's fault, and intentionally or unintentionally pointed out that it was disrespectful to King Yangqiu, Yumu had shut the mouths of many elders and members of Yu clan so that they could no longer defend Yu Lei. Wu Qi bowed respectfully to Yumu and said with a smile, "Why do you say that, Your Excellency Yumu? What does the words and deeds of Yu clan have to do with the words and deeds of a lunatic like Yu Lei? The culprit has been killed by me on the spot. Let's just forget about it, shall we?" Yumu was very satisfied with Wu Qi's attitude. Although Wu Qi had established a relationship with King Yangqiu, he was still so respectful to him, which made him feel very comfortable. He gave Wu Qi an appreciative look, then nodded with a smile, indicating that he would let go of the matter of Yu Lei's disrespect to King Yangqiu. They exchanged a glance tacitly, and then Wu Qi tightened his face and stamped hard on Yumu's head, making the severely wounded Yumu's skull creak. Fortunately, Yumu had been in contact with ghosts and deities for many years, and as a result, his muscles and bones had been nourished by the aura of ghosts and deities and improved to a certain extent. As a result, his fleshly body was comparable to an ordinary mid-tier heaven immortal who had tempered his body. Therefore, although Wu Qi's foot was strong, it did not break his head. But, it was, after all, a great humiliation to be stepped on by someone, especially for someone like Yumu. It was a stain that could never be washed away for the rest of his life. Yumu rolled his eyes and fixed them on Wu Qi. His eyes were cold and gloomy, and there was no change of emotion in them. But, Wu Qi knew that Yumu's hatred for him had reached its peak, and it was now a battle of life and death. But, they were in Zhongning City, right in front of Yu clan's mansion. How could he kill Yumu here? If Wu Qi were a noble of Diyu, and if he had a title of nobility, given what had happened today, Yu Lei's provocation, and then Yumu's retaliation, it would be justifiable for him to kill Yumu and Yu Lei. At most, he would be punished with a demotion of his title of nobility. But, although Wu Qi had a military rank now, he was just a commoner, and he had no right to kill Yumu. He could kill Yu Lei because he deserved to die for insulting King Yangqiu. But, even if Wu Qi had the ability to kill a man like Yumu, he could not do it in public. Otherwise, Wu Qi would be provoking all the powerful clans in the system of Diyu's Directorate of Celestials, as well as all the nobles of Diyu. If that happened, even King Yangqiu would not be able to protect Wu Qi. Therefore, Wu Qi could not kill Yumu, and he could only assassinate him from behind, not let Wu Qi kill him in public. Taking a deep breath, Wu Qi rubbed Yu Miao's face with his boot, grinding the flesh to a pulp. "The matter of Yu Lei is over," he said solemnly, "but, I can't believe Your Excellency Yu Miao attacked me. Ha, does the left minister of Zhong province, Yumu, have no respect for me?" Yumu smiled faintly, then nodded and said, "Yumu was indeed rude. General Tan Lang is now King Yangqiu's personal guard, and a great talent whom King Yangqiu has personally recruited to assist in military affairs. Yumu brazenly attacked and killed General Tan Lang, and Yumu is to blame for it. General Tan Lang has seriously wounded Yumu with a counterattack, and we, the Yu clan, have no objection." On behalf of the entire Yu clan, Yumu had made the decision. As the current clan leader of the Yu clan in Zhong province, his words were tantamount to Yumu being beaten up for nothing, and his legs being bitten off by Ao Buzan for nothing. With Yumu's guarantee, the people of the Yu clan could never openly retaliate against Wu Qi. As for Yumu sending someone to assassinate him from behind. Wasn't Yumu and Wu Qi sending someone to assassinate each other? It was inevitable, so there was no need to mention it. Wu Qi smiled grimly and gave Yumu's head another hard kick. You can escape death, but you can't escape punishment. Wu Qi said in a deep voice, His Excellency Yumu suddenly tried to kill me, and I can bear it. After all, even if that unfilial son of his is a troublemaker, it is inevitable that he will do something irrational out of anger. But, Elder Yumu, aren't you being disrespectful to King Yang Qiu by acting so recklessly? More and more people of the Yu clan were gathering around, and some of their private armies had sealed off the streets. All the nearby mansions were the residences of the important ministers of Zhong province, and all of them had their doors tightly shut. But, countless people were looking at them from the top of the walls and tall buildings, pointing and whispering among themselves. Yumu glanced at the onlookers, then rubbed his palms together. A plume of gray smoke rose from the ground and enveloped the entire street. After ordering the other members of the Yu clan to retreat hundreds of feet, he came to Wu Qi's side and cast a soundproof barrier to shroud himself, Wu Qi, and Yumu. Looking at Yumu, who was being kicked to the ground by Wu Qi, Yumu suddenly smiled happily and said, You're in the right here, so you can ask for anything. Well, as long as it doesn't hurt the foundation of the Yu clan, as the current clan leader of the Yu clan, I can agree to any request. They looked at each other and smiled tacitly, then Wu Qi said in a deep voice with a straight face, It's easy to solve this problem. His Excellency Yumu has committed such atrocities, and he has lost his dignity and dignity. Why don't we ask him to step down from the post of Left Minister of the Directorate of Celestials? Yumu agreed to Wu Qi's first condition. Taking advantage of Yumu's broken legs and the fact that he had committed such atrocities to kick Yumu out of the Directorate of Celestials was something he had failed to achieve after years of hard work. So, why not? Once Yumu stepped down, he could immediately promote his closest confidant to take over the post of Left Minister of the Directorate of Celestials in Zhong province. With that, the entire power of the Directorate of Celestials in Zhong province would fall into his hands. Yumu trembled with anger. He gritted his teeth and growled. But, how could he have the strength to resist when Lei Meng and Gue Shao collided head-on with him just now, and the aftermath had seriously wounded him? Wu Qi's brute force was so strong that he could not move even a little bit when he stamped his foot on Yumu's head. Yumu insulted His Excellency in the street, and His Excellency is magnanimous enough to let it go. But, what about the fee for covering up his shame? Wu Qi rubbed his fingers. This was the first time the term fee for covering up his shame had appeared on Pangu continent. There was no doubt that Wu Qi had made a great contribution to the construction of spiritual civilization in the Yu dynasty. Fee for covering up his shame. Yumu and Yumu were stunned at the same time. And the compensation for mental damage. Wu Qi had once again added bricks and tiles to the construction of spiritual civilization in the Yu dynasty. Yumu was a smart man, but if he was not, he could not have become the Grand Oracle of the Directorate of Celestials and the current clan leader of the Yu clan in Zhong province. Yumu gave Wu Qi a thoughtful look and said in a deep voice, Yumu has insulted His Excellency, and His Excellency's reputation has been tarnished. Yu Lei has been killed by you in the street, but as for His Excellency's reputation, we can only make up for it with some gold, silver, and jewelry. Wu Qi looked at Yumu, and Yumu looked at Wu Qi. After looking at each other for a while, they looked down at Yumu at the same time. His Excellency Yumu should be very rich. Wu Qi said in a deep voice. Yumu nodded and smiled. His Excellency Yumu should be very rich. Yumu nodded with a smile and said, That's true. Whose son caused the trouble, he should bear all the responsibility himself. After dispelling the soundproof restrictive spell and dispersing the thick gray fog, Yumu summoned all the elders of Yu clan at the entrance of his house and told them about Wu Qi's request. He cautiously warned the elders that if they did not meet Wu Qi's request, Wu Qi would definitely complain to King Yang Qiu, and at that time, Yumu was likely to be severely punished by King Yang Qiu. A quarter of an hour later, the elders of Yumu's branch emptied more than half of their storehouse and fulfilled Wu Qi's blackmail request. With a big smile on his face, Yumu took Wu Qi's hand and personally sent him into the teleportation formation. Wu Qi walked into the formation with a pair of sleeves and bowed to Yumu, then took his leave with a smile on his face. He had killed his son, wounded his father, and seized his property. Wu Qi suddenly breathed a deep sigh. Chapter 682. In Diyu Province, Mingu Province was a first-grade province with the same status as Zhong Province. It was also the largest province with the strangest topography near Zhong Province. Apart from a few plains and mountains, more than 95% of the land in this vast province was filled with sunken valleys. From the east to the west, from the south to the north, countless low-lying valleys that looked like the sulci of the human brain could be found everywhere in Mingu State. The largest of them, Min Valley, occupied 30% of the land in Mingu Province. It covered a huge area, and its deepest known depth was 700,000 miles below sea level. Even the supreme oracles of Diyu were not interested in exploring the deeper and more dangerous valleys. Legend had it that Min Valley was formed from the navel of the great Saint Pangu, who had incarnated Pangu continent. There was no such thing as the deepest valley in Min Valley. As long as you looked for it, you would find a valley that was deeper than the previous one. The capital city of Mingu Province, Green Valley City, was located at the edge of Min Valley, in a huge valley less than 100 miles deep. Green Valley City was a vast expanse of fertile and mature farmland, with abundant sunshine and dense water vapor, which made it extremely rich in natural resources. Mingu Province was not only rich in all kinds of spirit herbs that liked the shade, but also the largest producer of all kinds of spirit items on Pangu continent, such as chalcedony and milk of spirit stone. Naturally, the union of 10,000 immortals had many strongholds here. There were too many deep valleys, too many hiding places, and an abundance of all kinds of natural treasures that were helpful to immortal cultivators. Even the output of demon beasts and demon spirits was 100 times that of other provinces in Diyu. Therefore, many immortals and itinerant cultivators of Myriad Immortal Alliance were scrambling to open up cave abodes in Mingu Province. As for the other itinerant cultivator clans that did not belong to Myriad Immortal Alliance, no one knew how many of them had settled down here. When Wu Qi walked out of the teleportation formation in the center of Green Valley City, a few black-robed heralds were already waiting for him. After verifying Wu Qi's identity medallion, seal, and other items, a few military officers brought Wu Qi into a coach that was pulled by a three-headed blue lion. The oracle who controlled the chariot gave a soft cry. A thin layer of cloud rose from under the chariot, lifting the chariot and the guards brought by Wu Qi hundreds of feet into the air as they sped out of the city. Only on the chariot did Wu Qi have a chance to take a closer look at Green Valley City. The layout and even the shape of the other cities in Great Yu were exactly the same. The prefecture overseer mansion was right in the center of the city, the military court and the directorate of celestials were on the left and right, and the punishment court was in a corner of the city, next to a dungeon built underground. Basically, anyone who had been to any first-grade province of Diyu would not get lost in Green Valley City, because all the halls and toilets were in the same position, and even the size of the toilets remained the same. The only difference between Green Valley City and Zhongning City was that, because of the different geological structure, the rocks around Green Valley City had a slight tinge of green, which made the whole city look greener and livelier than Zhongning City, which was covered with dark clouds. After flying for hundreds of miles, Wu Qi came to a flat grassland and saw a cloud platform hovering 1,000 feet above the ground. On top of it were large tents, ceremonial gates, barracks, and soldiers performing drills. Compared to Bo Yunting's cloud platform, this one was several times larger, and in the middle of it was a small hall with 3 entrances. This was King Yang Qiu's field headquarters. Below the cloud platform was a neatly arranged barracks. At a glance, Wu Qi could see more than 20,000 black tents. According to the system of Diyu army, each tent was occupied by 10 soldiers, which meant that there were at least 200,000 soldiers here. High up in the clouds, hundreds of huge flying boats were cruising and patrolling in the air. Occasionally, oracles from the Directorate of Celestials would fly past on clouds, and from time to time, ghostly figures could be seen flickering in the dark clouds. What surprised Wu Qi even more was that, from time to time, there would be a few faint beams of light that shone down from the sky, covering an area of 100 miles in circumference. When he was shrouded by these beams of light, he felt his body tighten, and vaguely, tiny electric arcs burst out from his body. It was a divine ability similar to the void glimpsing grand magic of immortal magic. Wherever the beams of light passed, there would be magical treasures that could break the invisibility spells of immortal magic, and it was a very good way to prevent enemy scouts from sneaking into the camp to spy on the army. If someone were to use a divine ability to spy on the camp, the beams of light could also give an early warning, allowing the oracles to react at any time. It was a very good divine ability, but no one in the army under Bo Yunting's command knew how to use it. Perhaps it was a restrictive spell that was only activated by some powerful magical artifact. But, whatever the case, it proved that King Yang Qiu's army was much better treated than the army of Zhong province. Wu Qi looked up at the sky. There were only 3 flying ships in the entire Zhong province, and he saw 12 of them. In terms of wealth, the armaments for King Yang Qiu's army of 200,000 soldiers were equivalent to the total of all the armies in 4 Zhong province. Led by a few military officers, Wu Qi stepped onto the cloud platform of King Yang Qiu's field headquarters. His guards were led to a nearby camp to rest, and after a strict identification, Wu Qi finally entered the Great Hall in the center of the cloud platform and saw King Yang Qiu, who was discussing the battle plan with his aides. Whether it was to use Great Hall or his tent, they both liked to compress the void with a divine ability similar to the interstitial space. From the outside, King Yang Qiu's Great Hall was no more than hundreds of feet in length and width, and only tens of feet in height. But, as soon as he entered, Wu Qi found that it was more than 10 miles long, about 7 miles deep, and about a mile high. There were no pillars in the Great Hall, and the empty space gave people a great psychological pressure. On both sides of the Great Hall, several hundred longbow men clad in rock armors were seen standing with their backs pressed against the walls. Their eyes flickered with a golden gleam as they blinked, and the powerful aura emanating from them made Wu Qi feel a tightness in his chest. These longbow men were very powerful warriors, and Wu Qi even suspected that their cultivation bases had broken through the realm of gold immortals. The ostentation of a king of Great Yu was indeed different from that of a local official. There were no more than 100 generals under Bo Yunting who were strong enough to fight against gold immortals, but the hundreds of longbow men whom King Yang Qiu used as guards of honor were all as strong as gold immortals. The ceiling of the Great Hall was inlaid with countless pearls and gems, and the clear light from them made a map of mountains, rivers, and underground energy veins on the floor stand out. The three-dimensional map of mountains, rivers, and underground energy veins was changing violently. From time to time, mountains and rivers could be seen flickering in it, but most of them were deep valleys that made one's scalp go numb. King Yang Qiu's lower body was covered with a black skirt-like armor and a lion belt around his waist, leaving his upper body bare except for a bronze breastplate and half a pauldron. When the disheveled King Yang Qiu saw Wu Qi come in, the corners of his mouth twitched slightly as if he was smiling. He beckoned at Wu Qi and said in a deep voice, "Tan Lang, come here and have a look at the terrain here." With a casual point of his finger, the map of mountains, rivers, and underground energy veins on the floor flickered and revealed a valley about 10,000 miles long and 100 miles wide, shaped like an eye, with a deep pool of water in the center of the eye. The valley was filled with stone peaks that stood about 10,000 feet tall, very thin, and very straight. Only the pool of water was hundreds of miles in circumference, which was a beautiful scenery. Near a hill next to the pool, there were many palaces and pavilions made of gold bricks and jade tiles, all of which were shrouded in a faint purple mist. When a breeze blew past, an immortal aura rose into the air. Wu Qi cupped his fist and answered, then strode up to the map and fixed his eyes on the valley, which was actually more than 10,000 miles long, but only a few miles long in the map. Presumably, this map was made by De Yu's military court, and was specially used for marching and fighting. As long as Wu Qi cast his eyes on a mountain, information about it would be fed back to him in the form of divine sense. After giving the valley a careful look, Wu Qi nodded thoughtfully. It was a formation constructed with the help of the natural terrain, and the person who constructed it must be of a very high level. There were a total of 36,000 stone peaks in the valley, and all of them had become the eye of the formation. The formation corresponded to the stars, and there should be an extremely powerful immortal artifact in it as its foundation. That was why it was so powerful. Anyone who was not a true master of formations would find it difficult to recognize the principle of the formation, let alone break it. After pretending to ponder for a while, Wu Qi said slowly, "This seems to be a formation constructed by an immortal." King Yang Qiu raised his eyebrows and looked at Wu Qi happily. Just as he was about to say something, a faint laugh suddenly came from the side. "Since you found out that this is a formation constructed by an immortal, do you have a way to break it, General? If you can really break the formation as the legend says, His Excellency will definitely reward you handsomely. But, can you really understand the secret of this formation?" The laughter was full of sarcasm, and the words were aggressive toward Wu Qi. In short, the speaker was full of malice toward Wu Qi. Surprised, Wu Qi raised his head and looked towards the direction of the voice. He saw a middle-aged man sitting on a four-wheeled wooden chair. He was clad in a clean white long robe, with a black silk belt tied around his waist. He was holding a goose feather fan in his hand, and his hair was disheveled. He looked like a transcendent being. The man was handsome and elegant, but the way he looked at Wu Qi was full of disdain, sarcasm, jealousy, and malice. Grinning coldly, Wu Qi cupped his fist to the man and asked, "May I know your name, mister?" The man waved his fan slightly, but he didn't say anything in a reserved manner. King Yang Qiu glanced at the man and said lightly, "General Tan Lang, this old mister is Yu Qingcheng, the master of Yu Academy founded by my father." "Yu Academy? What a familiar name. Yu Qingcheng." Wu Qi burst out laughing. "Wasn't Yu Qingcheng the clan master of the Yu clan and the founder of Yu Academy when the Yu clan of Great Yen suddenly prospered? This old fellow is not dead yet." Wu Qi laughed at himself. He could not believe that he and the Yu clan were fated to meet someone like Yu Qingcheng here. No matter why Yu Qingcheng was provoking Wu Qi just smiled and said, "So, old mister, you can break this formation?" As soon as Wu Qi said that, Yu Qingcheng's face turned purple-red. "You're tuning in to the Blissful Bookshelf YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.